So, back to it, and away we go with section 2. Over to you, Dad.
Thanks, Gaza, and welcome to part 2 of this live stream from the Iconic Studio live in Derby, England. Now, in this section, having set the nature of reality, I'm going to apply it to the world of the five senses and all that's going on now, and I'm going to take it in to this whole COVID nonsense that we've been subjected to. And first of all, the truth doesn't change because you don't want to hear it. And this is something that a lot of people tend to believe, that if they don't want to hear it, then it's not the truth anymore. But it's not. The truth is the truth. And just because you don't want to hear it or you don't want to believe it doesn't mean it's not the truth. And this is a great quote from Mark Twain. Truth is stranger than fiction because fiction is obliged to stick to perceived possibilities. Truth isn't, which is why truth tends to go into some very, very strange places, even beyond fiction. And here's a strange one. Well, it won't be strange to a lot of people watching this, but it will be strange to vast numbers of people around the world. We don't live in multi-party states with political choice. We live in one-party states where ultimately a force in the background is controlling all sides. If not directly, and mostly it's directly with the main parties, it's by the way that it imposes itself on smaller parties so that they have no chance of actually becoming more than a smaller party. And this is an example of it in America. America's a classic example of it. You've got a group in the Republican Party which became known as neocons, and they controlled the Bush administration with all the aftermath of 9/11 and all the wars in the Middle East generated by this cult, for this cult. And they controlled the Republican Party. And then in the Democratic Party, you've got another group, which I call the Democons. It's the same thing, it's just a different party by name anyway, which their job is to control that and control that presidency. So the current President Biden, well, the current figurehead they call Biden, and Obama will have been controlled by the Democons and the Republican presidents by the neocons. And then you go one step back into the shadows and you find the hidden hand, the cult, that's actually controlling both sides. So it doesn't matter who you vote for, the cult always gets in. That's the point, which is why political change is not the way that this is going to be brought down. It's going to be brought down by direct action from the people, bypassing political change, because politics is there to impose the will of the cult, not to overturn it. And so let's look at this cult in more detail. And I'll go through some of the history as we go along. In the shadows, deep in the shadows, you have this spider. And the spider is not actually human. That level of the cult is this non-human force that I'm talking about. And then immediately around the spider, in the web of the cult, the global web, you've got the secret societies that are most exclusive. People, members of those secret societies, almost entirely not on public display, and they will know the big picture of what's going on and where this is all going. Then you come out from the spider and you start to meet, still in the hidden, the secret societies that we do know of, but we don't know what they do. We're talking the Freemasons, the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar, the inner core of the Jesuit order, and so on and so forth. And then you come out to this part of the web that I call the cusp. And this is where the hidden meets the seen, the world that we experience all the time. And these cusp organizations include the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations in America, the Trilateral Commission, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London, the Club of Rome, down the bottom there, which was created by this cult in the 1960s, 1968, specifically to use the environment as an excuse to centralize global power. I'll come to that, but that, of course, is where the hoax of human-caused global warming came from. And also in these cusp organizations is an explosion of what they call think tanks in every country. And these think tanks and these cusp organizations, their job is to take the agenda for the world from the hidden, from the spider, and to play it out in the world of the seen. So when you get out here, you see organizations, governments, Silicon Valley corporations, banking systems, and so on, health systems, media, ownership, and they appear to be, on the surface, random and unconnected. But if you go deep enough into them, into their structure, then you will attach to the web. They're all web organizations, ultimately, if you go deep enough. And this is how, and I'm going to come to this whole COVID hoax has been massively globally coordinated between media, Silicon Valley, health systems, World Health Organization, and all the rest of it, because they're all expressions of this cult. Now, another point to make is that this cult structure is actually holographic. Every part of it is a smaller version of the whole cult. So in each country, there, especially the major world directing countries, there is a sub-network of the global cult. And it works exactly like a transnational corporation. So you get somebody, I don't know, McDonald's, think of any corporation, you've got a headquarters somewhere in the world, that's the spider. And then in each country, you've got subsidiaries of the headquarters, and the subsidiaries answer to the headquarters. So if you go into a McDonald's in the Soviet Union, or Soviet Union, Russia, Soviet Union as was, in South Africa, in America, in Australia, Britain, anywhere, you basically go into the same McDonald's because the headquarters is dictating everything from the center. This is how it works. So the role of the subsidiary networks in each country is to impose in their country, their sphere of influence, the agenda of the spider. And that's how, for instance, since the COVID hoax was played, that the world has basically reacted in virtually every country, not quite everyone, but almost everyone, in exactly the same way. So if you take this cult and its subsidiary levels at a global and a national level, it's the same structure, you get this. At the top, you've got the inner core of this cult, which is dictating the global agenda. Through the secret societies, it controls banking and finance, thus controls choice. What is freedom? Freedom is the ability to make choices. The more choices you can make, the more freedom you have. And in the world that this cult has structured, a fundamental bottom line arbiter of how much choice you have is how much money you have. So by controlling the money and hoarding the money, they are hoarding choice. And thus they are hoarding freedom from the population through an ability to make choices that they want to make but can't make because they haven't got the money, mate. And they control the military and the intelligence networks who are operating to the cult, not to the country. The very, very important for what's coming in this section about COVID, alleged COVID, the big pharma medical policy in each country and globally through the World Health Organization, global corporations, government administration, law and courts, and the media and Silicon Valley, and that's your permanent government. They're always there. You're here today, gone tomorrow, political parties and politicians come and go below that line. Oh, I'm voting for them this time. Oh, nothing's changed. I'm going to vote for them. Oh, nothing's changed. I'm going to vote for them again. Oh, nothing's changed. I'm going to vote for them again. And so it goes on. It's called political choice. They come and go. This is the permanent government that runs everything, no matter who's in theoretical political power. So the idea that they must know because they're the government, is ridiculous. They don't know because they're not actually the government. They're just the official government. They're not the real government. And there'll be some people, place people within these governments that know exactly what it is and are working for this cult, and many others who are just bloody clueless that there is a cult. But they just get manipulated into going down certain directions. They're scientists, they must know. But science is dictated, as we've seen in the COVID period, science is dictated by the funding, and it's dictated by the hierarchy of science, which is controlled by the cult. That's why Follow the Science under the COVID period is follow the cult science, the cult version of science, which is designed to enslave you. They must know they're doctors. Oh, really? Well, first of all, mainstream medicine has not a clue what the human body really is. And secondly, it's a hierarchy of top-down control. As we've seen again in the last 18 months, if you're a doctor and you speak out against what the system says you can say or do, then you're out. So they must know they're doctors. They must do what they're told they're doctors. And what's ultimately telling them what to do is the cult. They must know they're teachers. Same. Find a teacher that wants to encourage their students to critically think and question what they're being told in the curriculum. Straight out the door. They know what they're told to know. Ultimately by the cult. They're professors. Same in university and academia. And as for journalists, well, don't frickin' start me. Is there any self-respect in journalism? I see no evidence, apart from the odd honourable exception, because that which controls what they work for dictates what they write and what they say. Thus, they must know they're journalists, they know what they're told to know. Ultimately, by this cult. And this is how it's all coordinated and expressed in the world of the scene. So, this is the foundation of everything. It's the cement that holds it all together, that dictates all these apparently different areas and institutions of human life so that they coordinate. My God, I keep saying it, but it's true, as we've seen in the last 18 months, so blatantly, that coordination. It's all down to this cult in the end. So, know the outcome and you'll see the journey is a phrase of mine. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the world of the scene and you see the apparent randomness of it, all the things that are happening, why is that happening? Why are they doing it like that? What's going on? Oh no, look what's happened. And it all seems random. Then you're not going to grasp that actually it's not random at all. But if you know the outcome that this cult is trying to achieve, then the random goes from being random, chaotic, and what's going on to very clear happenings and stepping stones towards the outcome that the cult wants. And on that basis, the COVID period can be read like an open book. So know the outcome and you'll see the journey. Where are we being taken? And where have we been taken step by step by step for such a long time with so few people realizing it? We're being taken to this. Now, I call it the Hunger Games Society now, since the Hunger Games movies came out, because that portrayed in many ways the society that this cult wants. But before I called it the Hunger Games Society, I called it something else. Because this is not something that I've come up with since COVID arrived. I've been talking and warning about this for decades, that this was the plan that this cult had for the world. And it is this. At the top of the pyramid, you have a tiny few people. I mean, they talk about the 1%. It's actually less than 1% at the core. Tiny. And it hoards all the wealth, thus choice, thus freedom, and all the resources, because the idea is to make the mass of the population dependent for survival upon them. And dependency equals control. Now, you look around you today, these food shortages and fuel shortages and these supply chain breaking up, it's not by accident, it's by design. It's part of creating dependency and shortage, thus dependency. And so the less than 1% hoards all that. And the idea is to hoard more and more and more of it. And of course, it's very much done that in the COVID era. And so at the bottom, the idea in the Hunger Games Society is that the population, en masse, is dependent for survival on the tiny few, thus under the control of the tiny few. And in the middle, between the few and the population, I've said for this long period, is planned to be not just a police state, but a military police state, a fusion of the two into a global military police operation. And that job is to impose the will of the few upon the many and to stop the many rebelling against the few. All I say is look around the world since the spring of 2020 and you'll see very clearly that's exactly one of the great many gifts that keeps giving, called COVID. So the idea in this Hunger Games Society is a global structure that looks like this. And this goes way back, best part of 30 years, I've been writing about. A world government, which in the end would not be elected, it would be appointed technocrats, bureaucrats, engineers, technocrats, etc. And technocrats are running the world now anyway through Silicon Valley. Politicians have far less power than they do. And the world government would control a world army, which would be this military police state I'm talking about, a world central bank that would control all finance, right down to the fine detail of every transaction of everyone on the planet, done technologically. It's happening now. It's all been planned. A world currency, and I first wrote about this in 1992. A world currency that would not be cash, merely electronic. And humans connected to artificial intelligence, so that artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. I'll go into all this as we go along. Under that structure, that global structure, would be superstates like the European Union and century-controlled trading blocs, etc., which would be the next level down to the world government. And then countries would be replaced by powerless regions and a global monoculture. They're targeting Western culture now, blatantly and systematically. But when they've done for that, they'll target other cultures, because what they want is a global monoculture, which they dictate. And under that edifice would be the people going about their everyday lives, which would be very, very different under this structure, although we're getting some idea very fast in this period of what that kind of world would look like. So I've been writing about this for all these decades, and it's happening in front of our eyes. So that's by chance, is it? Skeptics? It's just a coincidence. Well, of course it's not. I've been charting this plan all this period, right down to there, 1992-93, the Robots' Rebellion, when I was calling for a rebellion against what was coming. And to give you an idea of how planned this is a book I wrote some years ago called Phantom Self. And in it, I quote at some length a guy called Dr. Richard Day. And Dr. Richard Day is a big Rockefeller, was a big Rockefeller insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood, a Rockefeller organization, came out of the eugenics movement. And in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1969, Dr. Richard Day addressed a conference of pediatricians and asked them to turn off recording equipment and not to take notes, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change. Because what he represented, the network, the cult, he represented was going to change it. And what he said that day, 1969, maybe this is another coincidence, who knows? Anyway, here's some of the things he said. See if you recognize this in the world today. He said in 69 that technology would be used for reproduction without sex. That's going to be very clear as we go along in this section. Families to diminish in importance, euthanasia and the demise pill. The demise pill, he said, would eventually be a pill where you'd get to a certain age and you'd have to take this pill and commit suicide. Limiting access to affordable medical care makes eliminating the elderly easier. Eliminating the elderly, that's the theme of this section. New difficult to diagnose untreatable diseases. Suppressing cancer cures as a means of population control. Restructuring education as a tool of indoctrination. Hello. More time in schools, but pupils wouldn't learn anything. Controlling who has access to information. What? Schools as the hub of the community, taking over from parents. Changing laws to promote moral and social chaos. The encouragement of drug abuse to create a jungle atmosphere in the cities and towns. Promote alcohol abuse. Restrictions on travel. Another ILO. The need for more jails, no more psychological or physical security, crime and used to manage society, curtailment of US industrial preeminence, shifting populations and economies, tearing out the social roots, sport as a tool of social engineering and change, sex and violence inculcated through entertainment, implanted ID cards, microchips, food control, weather control, knowing how people respond, making them do what you want. This is the psychological foundation of the COVID rules and regulations. Falsified scientific research. Oh, God. Use of terrorism, surveillance, implants, and televisions that watch you. The arrival of the totalitarian global system, 1969, Dr. Richard Day. The World Wide Web was invented in 1989, right? Whoa. Richard Day talked about it in that talk in 1969. Smart TVs came out in 2008. Richard Day described them in 1969. And Orwell knew about them in 1948 with his telescreens, watching you in your own homes. And 1984 came out in 1948. That was only 20 years before Day made his speech. And Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, 1932. Come to him later. These were not coming totally from their imagination, but from an understanding of where this was all going. And that's because of this, the two worlds. You have the world of the cult, the secret societies hoarding this knowledge, and then you have the world of the rest of us, the population. But if either you are involved there, like Richard Day, or you work your ass off to uncover what they know, you can predict the future very accurately by predicting what the plan is of the cult if there is no intervention to stop it. Because if there's no intervention on what they want will happen. The whole point of what I've been doing for 30 years is to try to encourage an intervention so that this doesn't play out. So, who's taking us there? Absolute, solid gold psychopaths. Psychopaths. Extreme in nature. Psychopaths like Gates, and even at his level, he's only a bloody gopher. He's a rich gopher, but he's still only a gopher in this cult. psychopath extraordinaire as he is, he's still not in the class of the psychopaths in the shadows that are controlling him. So this is a list, part of what's known as the Hare test, named after the man who compiled them. The Hare test of traits of psychopaths. And if you have enough, you are officially a psychopath. Right at the top in a psychopath, no empathy. No ability to put yourself in the feelings and the experience of what you're making people suffer and experience. And if you can't do that, you have no fail-safe mechanism. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. It's what stops you doing things to people because you can put yourself in their shoes. If you can't, there are no limits. No remorse, no shame. Parasites, they feed off the efforts of others. It's what this elite do. Pathological liars, and they do whatever it takes to get what they want. That's the psychopath, and these people are super psychopaths. So the world, as I've been saying for a long time, is controlled by psychopaths, and it's run by idiots. We tend to interact with the idiot level in the dark suits and government administration and politicians. But actually the control comes from psychopaths. And that's why the impositions on the world have become so unbelievably psychopathic. So how are we being taken there? We are taking ourselves there. This cult, at its core, you would get in a single room. And they are imposing their will upon the best part of 8 billion people. How do they do that? Because the billions give their power to the few. And all through human history it's happened. Now, they don't know they're giving their power to a cult. They're just giving their power. And this structure, this very simple structure, is how this core of the cult imposes its will, this spider, upon the entirety of the human population. The few at the top of the human hierarchy in the cult, they impose their will on the level below. And that level acquiesces to that will and imposes it on the level below them. And very quickly after you come down from that inner core of the cult, you're meeting levels of the human hierarchy that doesn't even know there's a cult. All they're doing is acquiescing to their perceived superiors and then imposing on their perceived inferiors. And all the way down this pyramid hierarchy of human society comes acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition. And then you come to the bottom of the pyramid and the mass of the people, billions. And if we acquiesce to that level of the hierarchy that's imposing upon us, ultimately on behalf of that cult, like politicians and law enforcement and all these other characters, medical people, then we complete a circuit between the inner core of the cult and the mass of the global population. A circuit of acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence that imposes the will of the tiny few upon the entirety of the global population. It is that simple. And I think I see from that the answer to it is equally simple. We'll get into that later. So this is how the few control the many. It's no bloody brain science, is it? The many do what the few tell them. And there's various techniques, psychological manipulation techniques, that are used to advance this agenda too and scam the psychology of the population. One I called a long time ago problem reaction solution. There's another version called no problem reaction solution. which is actually COVID and human-caused climate change, they're no-problem reaction solutions, as I'll come to. But problem, reaction, solution. You want to change society, solution, in a way that you know that if you just say this is what we're going to do, you'll get big pushback, because why are you doing this? There's no reason for it. So what you do is create a reason, or the illusion of a reason, no problem, reaction, solution. You create a problem. It could be a war, it could be a government collapse, it could be a financial collapse, it could be a terrorist attack, it could be a fake virus. And you tell the population the version of that problem that you want them to believe, and that's no problem because your global media is going to do that for you. And at stage 2, you want a reaction, fear, anxiety, and the feeling of do something about this problem. And then those who've covertly created the problem glean that reaction, do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they've created. And those solutions are always an advancement towards the Hunger Games society in all its facets and forms. And like I say, there's a no-problem version of that. I mean, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. There aren't any. We know there aren't any, but we're going to tell them there are some, because we've got an excuse to find to go and invade Iraq. Weapons of mass destruction, Saddam Hussein. Ooh, we've got to go in and get them. Well, they're not there, no, but the public don't know that, do they? No problem, reaction, solution. Just as powerful. The perception of a problem is just as powerful as a problem that really is. So this is the question. This is the antidote to problem, reaction, solution. Who benefits? Who benefits from me believing what I'm being told to believe? And the answer, every time, anyone that wants to centralize power and advance the Hunger Games society. And then the stablemate of problem, reaction, solution is what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, where you know if you go in massive steps, a bit different now since COVID arrived, but if you go in massive steps, then people are going to look around, look up from the telly, look up from the game shows, Strictly Come Dancing or whatever, and they're going to go, what's going on? What's going on? Because the change is so big. So they do it in steps, and each step is promoted as unconnected to all the other steps until you get long down the road and you look back and you see how far you've come. And it's something you could call creative destruction. This is how it works. You want to change the status quo to the status quo you ultimately want. So what you have to do is to destroy the status quo that exists. And when you've destroyed that, you then destroy that one. And then you destroy that one. And each destruction of the status quo and the imposition of the new one is further down the road towards the Hunger Games society. So what they're doing in the COVID era is destroying global society, the global status quo. Why? So they can build back better, the Great Reset, their new version of life on Earth. So the goal of this cult all along has been a global dictatorship. So when did it start? Well, I've gone way back with this. You can go back further, but let's pick it up here in the Fertile Crescent, the land between two rivers, Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates in what we now call Iraq. And it was here in the period of Sumer and Babylon, also down into Egypt as well, ancient Egypt, that you can pick this cult up on its journey into the world as it is now. And as they moved up into Europe, they became the Roman Empire. They established Rome and became the Roman Empire, and and everywhere this cult has headquartered itself, a massive empire has followed. So it moved up into Europe, into Britain, and out in all directions. And then eventually the cult moved up further into Europe and centered itself in London and Britain. And that is when we had the British Empire, on which it is said the sun never set, so vast was it. But it wasn't just the British Empire, massive as that was, it was lots of other European empires which by this time were cult controlled. And if you look at this map, only these kind of buff, sandy colored countries had no colonial presence out of Europe or no massive influence of countries in Europe. Europe basically took the world over, and that was where the cult was centered. And then we had this sleight of hand where we moved from overt control to covert control, and it was called decolonization. As these countries apparently rolled back colonial control, that was only on the surface. They left out in those countries the bloodlines that are very much part of this cult, and also the secret society networks. And they've gone on controlling those countries ever since, except covertly, which means more efficiently. And then, following all this period, came the frenzy of globalization, which is what? The centralization of global power in every area of our lives. And it's a simple equation. The more you centralize power, the more power you have at the center to centralize even quicker, which is why this centralization of global power has got faster and faster. But also, at every step that you centralize power, fewer people are controlling more and more. And eventually, and we're there now, this cult went global and took over control to a vast extent, as we're seeing now, global society. And it was achieved, and has been achieved thus far, by total perceptual control. When there's a few of you, and you want to control billions, until you reach the point where you can attach your artificial intelligence to the billions and turn them into a hive mind, before that point, that's where they're heading now, fast, you can't control them physically. There's too many of them and too few of you. What you have to do is control their perceptions so they perceive, believe, and thus behave in a way that suits your agenda. And this is where you come back to the two worlds, where you're hoarding the knowledge of the nature of reality and where the world's being taken, and you're keeping the public in ignorance of that and selling them a complete illusion of the world they think they're living in. Thus, you can achieve perceptual control. And perception, as I talked about in part one, which is why that was so important, that information, perception creates reality. This cult, in its secret society control of information and knowledge, advanced information and knowledge, it knows that. It knows that if you can control someone's perception, you'll control their behavior. And if you can do it to enough people, you control human society. Information becomes perception. We get our perception from information received. It might be a personal experience, or it might be the 10 o'clock news, it might be a Facebook post. But we get our perceptions from information received. This is why this cult is so desperate to control all information so it can control perception. People like me are censored by the mainstream internet because I'm putting out information which is giving people another way of looking at the world. They don't want people to have another way of looking at the world. They only want them to have their way, which is why they're heading to a position, this is what I said decades ago now, that the plan was to create a situation where all information, anything that anyone hears and sees, is only what is allowed by the state and agreed with by the state. So information control, perception control, behavior control, human society control. And the idea, as I said in part one, is to keep people in a state of what I call focused myopia, basically 5 sense reality, and no peripheral vision, and stuck in the 5 sense bubble. This is where we have to be for the few to control the many. And if you look through human history, you'll see the same dynamic. It's unbelievable. Look at any culture, almost any culture, any period of history, and you'll see the few controlling the many. Why? Because the many give their power to the few. It's almost like a reflex action, human reflex action. Almost genetic. And there's another common theme through history, and that is, in all these different cultures and religions, of a unseen force manipulating human society. Christianity talks about the devil, Satan, and demons. The Gnostics, who were not regular Christian believers, they talked about Yod-Baoth and the archons, archons being a Greek word meaning rulers. Islam talks about the jinn. Judaism has a negative force like Samael. And Native Americans, the Cree tribal people use this word, but it's a common theme through Native Americans, the word Wetiko, which is the one I'll use from now on. And this common theme is of a negative force with a malevolent agenda for humanity, manipulating human society from the hidden. And how do they do it in the world of the seen? Through this cult. So Wetiko is described by the Native Americans as a malignant psychic virus threatening us. And whether it's Wetiko, whether it's the archons, whether it's the Chitahuri in Zulu lore, there is this common theme, and they're just different names basically for the same thing. This negative force seeking to overpower humanity. So Wetiko, they call a mind virus, and this is an old slide of mine from an old talk ages ago, in which, before I'd come across this concept, Native American concept of Wetiko, but even then I was calling this force the self-aware virus, as in computer virus. And this computer virus is fear. This is why they want humanity to be drawn into states of fear, because you're being drawn into the frequency of Wetiko, the self-aware virus, computer virus as I'll call it. This is a description of how Wetiko came about. First Nation tribes coined a term to describe the disease of the white man. I'll come to that, it's not only white people. Wetiko. In their understanding, Wetiko consists of two essential characteristics. Chronic inability, now this is going to come again and again from so many angles. Chronic inability for empathy and egoistic fixation with one's own personal benefit and profit. First peoples used the word specifically because they could not fathom any other explanation for the behavior of European colonialists or colonists. And here we have again the trait of a psychopath. Number one, no empathy. That which is controlling psychopaths is Wetiko. Wetiko, the virus of egotism and selfishness, according to Native Americans. Wetiko, exploring the alarming rise of narcissism. Narcissism, again, an expression of this distorted, inverted, chaotic, what we would call evil, which I define as the absence of love, consciousness, the Native Americans call Wetiko. Now, narcissism is taking this flipping world over, not least in the woke arena. So what is it? It's a personality disorder characterized by an exaggerated sense of self-importance, need for admiration and lack of empathy, pleasure derived from contemplation or admiration of self, a regression to an infantile stage of development. Soros, Schwab, Gates, to a T, they are in an infantile stage of development. Anyone that wants to impose their will on other people on the scale that they do and are, and do so for almost the joy they get from it, is an infantile stage of development. These people are regressed in terms of their psychology. And Wetiko is not just about white people. Wetiko is a state of being. And if you fall into its frequency, it starts to influence you. I'll come to this. And you become an expression of it. And this cult is an expression of Wetiko. That's why it is as it is. And any race, any background, any culture can be Wetiko'd, including these non-human races behind, ultimately, the spider from the unseen. Wetiko is a state of being. And you know, where I've talked to people that have interacted with these reptilian entities, the word that keeps coming up again and again is that they are psychopathic and have no empathy with those that they misuse and abuse. It's the Wetiko is the common theme in all this. And this guy, Paul Levy, has written a great book about Wetiko, in which he says this: Wetiko operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously, intrapersonally within ourselves, interpersonally among ourselves, collectively as a species, as well as transpersonally in the realm beyond our personal selves. Those afflicted with Wetiko consume, like a cannibal, the life force of others, human and non-human, for private purposes or profit, and do so without giving back something from their own lives. Soros, Schwab, Gates, to a T. The cult to a T. And so Wetiko is driving this cult and driving the agenda of human control. And it's behind these horrors in the world. The wars of conquest, the famines, the terrorism, the hunger, the conflict. All of it are expressions of Wetiko, because they are expressions of the Wetiko consciousness, which is all of those things. And the idea is to manipulate humanity into psychological and emotional states that will bring their frequency down into the Wetiko range. This is why they don't want them connected to infinite awareness. They don't want them in any form of expanded awareness, not even in your regular human body awareness. They want them in Wetiko awareness, because then Wetiko can dictate their perceptions, dictate their behavior, and the more that go into that range dictate the world. And so then there's levels of this Wetiko. There's the extreme Wetiko controlled. These are your Schwabs and your Gateses and your Faucis and all these people, and the inner core of this cult you never see. There's the lying level of Wetiko, because one of the traits of psychopaths is that they lie and have no compulsion about lying, so long as lying gets them what they want. So we're into the lying politicians, we're into the unbelievably lying media, all expressions of Wetiko. But this is the point. If you can pull members of the general population into the Wetiko frequency, then you can make an attachment to them, a bit like possession. And you can start to change their perceptions, thus their behavior. And we have seen, I would suggest, vast numbers of people in the COVID era pulled into this Wetiko state of consciousness. And that's why, A, they can't see the bloody obvious, and B, why they are so unbelievably antagonistic to that which is in effect challenging the Wetiko consciousness in a higher state of awareness. And because this Wetiko consciousness is an inversion, everything it is involved in is an inversion. This is why this world is actually an inversion. In every way you see it. One expression in the secret society satanic cult network is Satanism. And that's why Satanism uses inverted symbols, the inverted cross, the inverted pentagram. It's because everything it does is an inversion. And evil, in my definition, is the absence of love. It's an inversion of love. It's also an inversion of life. Very interestingly, appropriately, evil is the word live written backwards, inverted. It is an inversion of life. And here's a great quote that kind of sums it up. Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Lawyers destroy justice. Universities destroy knowledge. Governments destroy freedom. The major media destroy information. And religions destroy spirituality. That's classic Wetiko. And what Wetiko does, coming back to something I mentioned in the first part, is it's looking to get into these spaces between expanded levels of consciousness not in embodiment and those levels of consciousness in embodiment. To isolate, this is the common theme again, to isolate people's perceptions in the five senses of body, mind, consciousness. To isolate them in the five senses and thus control their perception of reality. And once this attachment can take place, where people are pulled down into these lower frequencies of Wetiko, that connection can take place, and then Wetiko can start to feed through the subconscious mind overwhelmingly perceptions of reality and perceptions of self, which become the perceptual state of the population that fall into the Wetiko frequency. And we've seen this so blatantly in the last 18 months. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." We have to become conscious of what is happening in the way I'm talking about, because once it becomes conscious, it loses its control over you. 95%, it is said, of human behavior and response comes from subconscious influences and not the conscious mind. And it's Wetiko that is seeking to infuse itself into the subconscious, where you don't realize it's happening. And then when that filters through to the conscious mind as perceptions, opinions, people think they're their own opinions and their own perceptions, when actually they've been infused at a subconscious level and they're not their opinions at all. Now, anyone that's been reading some of my books over the years will be able to see this immediately, what's on the screen. Anyone, probably about 95% of people who have never seen this before, won't see it. But in this picture is a subliminal message. And it's very clear once you know what it is. And subliminal means below threshold, below the threshold of the conscious mind. And what this Wetiko is doing is putting this perceptual energy into the subconscious mind, subliminal to the conscious mind. Now, if I show what that is, if you look between the plants, it very clearly shows the word sex, which the conscious mind couldn't see, and the vast majority of people anyway. The point being that once it's pointed out to the conscious mind where that subliminal is, every single time, without fail, going right as long forward as you want, anyone sees that picture again, the subliminal they couldn't see before will be the first thing they see. And it will be because the conscious mind has been made aware of it. And what people like me have been doing over the years is taking the subliminal manipulation and showing it to the conscious mind of people. And once people see it consciously, it stops having the impact upon them that it would otherwise do and has been having up to that point. So information, perception, and behavior is being put in at the subconscious level. And once we make it conscious, it loses that impact. And you'll see this in this 18 months or more of COVID, where you'll see people say, I'll tell you what I think's going on. This is my opinion. And what will come out of their mouth is the official narrative, virtually word for word, but they think it's their own opinion. It's not. It's someone else's opinion they've taken to be their own. This is how it works. So, fear, I need protection, is one of the key subconscious and conscious messages that is constantly given to us to bring us into this Wetiko vibrational arena. Because fear is a low vibrational state, and it's what Wetiko is, fear. And so, all the time, we're being given reasons to fear. And if you're not frightened of this, we'll think of something else. And if you fall for it, you've been Wetiko'd. You've been mind mesmerized to follow that subservient, fearful response. Because if you look at it, when anyone is manipulated to fear, they look outside of themselves for someone or something to protect them from what they fear. Oh, I fear COVID. Doctor. Appropriately, that brings us to the scamdemic. All that I've talked about today so far can be related to this. Every bit of it. The scamdemic. I must be terrified of COVID. That's what's been infused into the conscious and subconscious mind, the subconscious by constant repetition. And as a result, people's behavior, vast tracts of human behavior anyway, has been dictated. COVID exists. Yes, COVID exists. I beg to differ. COVID is a virus of the mind. It's not a virus of what people would call the body. It's a virus of the mind. And COVID is Wetiko. What is Wetiko? It's a virus of the mind. COVID is a symbol of Wetiko control in extremis of perception. And in these two books, Perceptions of a Renegade Mind and The Answer, I've gone into detail about this COVID nonsense and taken it apart syllable by syllable. But what I'm going to do now is go through the main fundamental dot connecting points of what's been happening and how and why. First of all, the idea that this, quote, virus came out of nowhere naturally, nonsense. They've been preparing for this for a very long time, and there is multiple levels of evidence to show that. One of them is the way the Rockefeller Foundation, cult to its DNA, was foretelling current events in 2010 in some considerable detail. And it was the Rockefeller family that created the World Health Organization in 1948, which has driven the COVID period. Then you had the Gates Foundation, the World Economic Forum of Klaus Schwab, Johns Hopkins University medical operation, running a large-scale simulation weeks before it apparently broke in China of a coronavirus pandemic. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And the Gates Foundation has run basically COVID policy since then. The World Economic Forum is using it to justify transformation of global society. And the Johns Hopkins operation has been counting all the fake cases and fake dead bodies globally. And I'll show what I mean by fake as we go along. Albert Camus, the welfare of humanity is always the alibi of tyrants. The idea that this psychopath cares about your health is beyond ridiculous. So what is the real agenda of this man? They care about your health, the health of the poor and downtrodden. Jeff Bezos parties with Bill Gates as the Microsoft frontman founder celebrates his 66th birthday with 50 friends on a $2 million a week private yacht before helicoptering them all to an exclusive resort in Turkey. These people care about your health. They care about your kids. So why are they doing it? Because it's not that. Why? Why would they launch this COVID hoax? Because of this. What they're doing and what the COVID period has done is massively advanced this Hunger Games society I've been talking about all these years. They have hoarded more wealth in the hands of the few, destroyed so much of the competition. They have imposed more and more of the police military state, and pulled more and more vast numbers of the masses into dependency upon authority in the state. I'll come to the global vaccine as we go along, fake vaccine actually, but that's fundamentally the reason they played the COVID hoax, so that they could get that shite inside people. But it's also brought about an extraordinary advance of the surveillance state and the fascist state, and it has destroyed independent income of vast numbers of people. And the plan is to finish off the rest. What does that mean? You want a structure in which a tiny few are dictating to a dependent on you global population, thus control. But you cannot do that while the population has independent from you forms of income and forms of employment. Because while they are getting that independent income and independent employment, thus income, they are not dependent on you, thus they're not under your control in the way you want. So the whole point of lockdown and all these shortages which are imposing themselves on smaller businesses is to destroy independent income and make everyone dependent upon the few. That's what it's about. And this closing down of business, non-essential business, and all that that's happened in the COVID period has all been designed to destroy the income of the population that is not connected to this elite. And that's what this is about. The absolute bullshit of asymptomatic transmission. Why did they bring that crap in? Because the idea was to destroy as much of independent income and business as possible outside the elite. And if they didn't play the scam of asymptomatic transmission, they could only at best justify isolating, locking down, the sick. Now, that would not have been enough to destroy what they've destroyed. So you bring in asymptomatic testing, you may not have any symptoms, but you can still pass it on, so you've got to go into isolation as well as everybody else. For the first time, we isolated the people that were healthy because of this. And if you look at lockdowns, this is California at the top, locked down heavily. This is Florida, locked down very mildly, if at all, most of the time. And look at the difference in so-called spread of the disease, but I'll get into that as we go along. So how did they pull it off? Right. Well, it's a massive psychological operation. Once you've got the cult that controls all the elements needed to pull it off, pulling it off becomes relatively straightforward. So this cult controls Gates. He's a gopher for the cult. It controls Big Pharma. It controls national medical systems, law enforcement, big tech, and Silicon Valley, the media, the World Health Organization, and so on. And so under its control are all the elements you need to pull off the scam that we've seen. And it came out of China, appeared to, for a reason. The cult was behind the Mao Revolution in China. For this reason, they wanted to create a closed society, which it was for a very long time, behind which a method, a technique, a technology of human control could be incubated and developed very quickly. Because if you're in the West, at least up to the COVID era, you're paying lip service to it being free, so you can go only so fast for a very long time in that direction of fascism. But in China, what the government says happens, so you can move it real fast. And what they developed in China was a method of human control and surveillance, not least using technology, that was being incubated to play out across the world. And look at what the West and much of the rest of the world has become since the COVID thing was played: China. And we've seen nothing yet if we let it go on. So I've been saying since the 90s, if you want to know what they plan for the West tomorrow, look at China today. So this cult controls Gates. And Gates was the driving force, certainly in the early days, of all this, and he's been the driving force behind the fake vaccines. And look at the connections, financial connections, to Professor Neil Ferguson, who produced the fake computer models that justified the locking down of America, of Britain, and many other countries. He controls and is connected to Fauci. He's connected to Whitty, Professor Chris Whitty, who's been driving policy in this country as Chief Medical Officer of England. And he connects into the World Health Organization and all these people producing the vaccines and all these people counting the fake numbers of cases and deaths. So this is just a few, but the same will be in every country virtually. Gates is dictating to the key players in each country who are driving the policy, which is how it becomes the same policy around the world. The cult not only controls Big Pharma, it created it. The pharmaceutical cartel. It was created originally by the Rockefeller family, who also created the World Health Organization, and what family is incredibly close to the Rockefeller family? The Gates family. So it was the Rockefellers that created the World Health Organization, and its role was to, and is to, control health policy globally under one roof and dictate globally. So Tedros, the head of the World Health Organization, was a Gates appointee. He runs the World Health Organization because of the billions he funds it with. And Tedros has been dictating to countries all over the world what their response to COVID should be. And Tedros worked for two Gates-funded companies before he was appointed by Gates, because he's a psychopath and a crook out of Ethiopia, to head the World Health Organization in this crucial period. Now, if you look at the permanent government, look at this one. Part of the permanent government in every country is control of the pharmaceutical health pyramids of hierarchy. And this is how they've done it. The World Health Organization dictates to all its member countries, which is basically the world, the response to, quote, COVID, and how to respond in terms of lockdown, in terms of fake vaccinations and all the rest of it. And what happens is, in each country, there is a hierarchy of their medical pyramid, their medical hierarchy, and the top of that hierarchy in each country dictates to all the lower levels. Thus, the World Health Organization dictates to the top level of each national hierarchy. That hierarchy dictates the World Health Organization policy down the pyramid to the doctors, the nurses, etc. And that's how it's been pulled off worldwide. And again, it's not just the population that acquiesces to imposition. Every hierarchy does this, including the medical hierarchy. You want me to rebel for my patients? What about my career? Oh no, I've got to stay silent. I know it's bad, but I've got my career to think about. And then we should never underestimate, my God, it's been brought out in the last 18 months. There's some great people in healthcare, some great genuine doctors in healthcare and nursing staff. But my God, there's some bloody psychopaths, and they are in greater number than almost anyone ever realized. And they're quite happy to use their patients and abuse their patients. I mean, what kind of doctor takes an extra £10 for every child or teenager that he or she fake vaccinates? What kind of medical ethics is that? So that's what you're dealing with. This could kill your kid or maim you for life, but they told me to do it. This is going on all over the world. And we have to reevaluate as a public, the dynamic between us and our perception of doctors and medical staff after what's gone on. And then you've got the genuine doctors who wanted to speak out about what was going on and all the manipulation that was going on of this COVID hoax, and they were silenced. NHS staff in Britain forbidden from speaking out publicly about coronavirus, and if they did, they're out. And once you understand the dynamic of this cult, many things fall into place. For instance, if you didn't know about that, you might think, why on earth, right at the start of this, did Facebook and YouTube, etc., announce that they were going to censor any posts or videos that were challenging the World Health Organization version of the COVID narrative? I mean, that's crazy, right? But it's not when you realize that the cult owns the World Health Organization, and the cult not only controls but created Facebook, Google, that owns YouTube, etc. So this is the cult censoring challenges to the cult. That's why they're doing it. The global media, owned by the cult. Anyone in Britain, look up Reach PLC. It's a big company that owns the Daily Mirror, the Daily Express, the Sunday Express, the Sunday People, the Daily Star, national newspapers, and 240 regional newspapers and local newspapers. And people that pick up the local newspaper, they think it's printed locally, and it's about, no, massive company owns it. And in that way, you can feed the same response and the same version of events through all these different papers and media organizations. And then the fact checkers appear out of nowhere. You notice there's an explosion of them in the COVID era. And their job is quite simple. They get up in the morning to rubbish any challenge to the official story by saying it's not true. and the official story is true. That's their job, and how they live with themselves, only they know. And then you've got these massive asset management companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street that oversee and hold massive numbers of companies, and thus can, in all different walks of life, that can then feed down the same policy to all of them. So, this is the COVID sequence. First of all, the blueprint was China. China had to set the model that the rest of the world followed. So what you had was all those pictures coming out of catastrophic consequences of the virus in China. You had people collapsing in the street. Well, how come people haven't collapsed in the street around the rest of the world with the same apparent bloody virus? Because it's a scam. It was selling a blueprint the rest of the world was meant to follow. So you had draconian lockdown. You had people pulled out of their homes and forced into isolation. And you had the big shutdown. And you had the social distancing narrative set. You had the child programming narrative. And then, as this COVID hoax was moving westward, and the Chinese propaganda had done its job, suddenly Wuhan eases coronavirus lockdown as restrictions intensify outside China. It was over for them at that period. You remember all those new hospitals they built? Oh, they're building new hospitals. Oh, it's so bad. People are dying in the street. Oh, my God, it might come to the West. Oh, my God, save me. And then by the bloody March of 2020, all 16 temporary hospitals in Wuhan are closed. Just as lockdown's kicking off all over the world. And in Wuhan, it's party time. What's the word or the phrase that comes to me? Taking the frickin' piss comes to me. It's party time in Wuhan. Just as we were locking down. So China was the die being cast. The Chinese model of responding to the, quote, virus had to be followed. And enter puppeteer and puppet. This is Ted Ross at that time. The Chinese government is to be congratulated for the extraordinary measures it has taken to contain the outbreak. China is actually setting a new standard for outbreak responses response, and it is not an exaggeration, you bloody liar. And then China's leader writes to Bill Gates, thanks him for his generosity in fighting the coronavirus, passed the sick bag, and then we had, passed 2 sick bags. Professor Neil Ferguson in Britain. One has to adopt the kind of community measures which have been adopted in places like Wuhan and China, where you try to reduce contacts between people in the community. China's response, as planned from the start, was going to be played out across the world. And it was Ferguson's computer models, of course, that justified the lockdowns of a Chinese kind. And people have asked, how could this guy, with the most horrendous, catastrophic record of being wrong with his computer models, keep getting hired for more? Because he keeps giving the cult what it wants to hear. That's why. And in America, there's Ferguson's computer models funded by Gates through Imperial College in London. Then you have the computer models in America, Institute for Health and Metrics and Evaluation, funded by Gates in America. And then you have Gates funding the Johns Hopkins organization, University of Medicine operation, that was compiling all the fake cases and the fake deaths. And so out of this cult web, in all its forms, has come this cacophony of lies, of coordinated lies, which is why you look around the world and you see the global media moving as one unit in terms of what it's saying and who it's attacking. And as the Nazis said, if you tell a big enough lie and tell it frequently enough, it will be believed. There's nothing in mind control more powerful than constant repetition. And if you want to see the scale of the lie, well, how about that? There is no virus. There never has been a virus. That's the scale of deceit. And I've been saying this since March, April 2020. And I've seen nothing to make me even think that that's not the case. How have they done it? How have they taken a virus that doesn't exist and made it appear to exist? By getting the cases through a fake test called the RT-PCR test that is not testing for the virus. Why? Because it can't. That's not what it was made to do. And then they introduced this unbelievable, for the first time, rule that if you test positive with a test not testing for the virus and die of any other cause within 28 days and more, then COVID-19 goes on your death certificate. And that's how they've got the cases, and that's how they've got the apparent deaths. That is simply redesignation of people dying of other things as COVID-19. The bigger the lie, the more we'll believe it. This is PCR test inventor, a brilliant man, genuine man, Kerry Mullis, who unfortunately died very conveniently for the cult, I have to say, a few months before the COVID era began. PCR tests, which he won the Nobel Prize for inventing, cannot accurately test for infectious diseases. Tests cannot detect free infectious viruses. And that's what they're using it for, to give you your fake cases, which become your fake deaths from COVID-19. This is what goes with the PCR tests distributed by the drug giant Roche. Not intended for use as an aid in the diagnosis of coronavirus infection, for research use only, not for use in diagnostic procedures. What? You tested positive for COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, the virus that's supposed to, the fake virus that's supposed to cause COVID-19. Therefore, by definition, no other evidence needed, he's got COVID-19. And yet the drug company distributing the test says, no, you can't do that. Well, they are doing it, mate. PCR tests from Creative Diagnostics for research purposes only, not for use in diagnostic procedures. And these tests, to test for or not test for the virus, all came out around the same time, just as the COVID era was starting around January 2020 in the West. So the whooping cough epidemic of 2006 turned out to be fake, and that was fake because they used the PCR test to get fake cases. So we were told at the start that this virus came out of a wet market in Wuhan, and that didn't really stand up at all. So they have moved to, it was released from this Wuhan lab, this top-level biolab, the bio safety lab level 4 in Wuhan. And we've had people come out saying, well, you know, whistleblowers, Chinese virologists, the virus came from a lab, dangerous virus and all that. Well, the point is it's not a dangerous virus, even if you believe in it. And the idea is one of two things. Either it came out of the lab by accident, or it came out by design. Well, let's take the accident part. The evidence that this COVID hoax was planned for a very, very long time is overwhelming, not least here with this Event 201. And we're being asked to believe that they planned this fake pandemic, but someone forgot to release a virus, a pathogen. So what they did was they sat around the table, having got it all prepared, strumming their fingers, waiting for a virus, quote, to be accidentally released from the Wuhan lab or some other lab. It's insane. Of course it didn't happen like that. It's planned. So the number 2 is that the virus was released on purpose from the lab. Well, so you're going to release this pathogen, right? Yeah. You don't want anyone to know that you've done it, right? No. So where are you going to release it? Well, we thought down the street from the top biolab in China. Do you think they'll make the connection? It's insane. And the third option is there never was a virus. It's all a scam on that level. And I've heard all this stuff about Fauci's department in America funding gain of function on a virus and stuff. Well, where's the bloody virus? I'll come to that as we go along. And just because money was passed over doesn't mean it was used to, successfully do that. And it doesn't mean it was actually used to do that. It could have been used on someone else with developing a vaccine or whatever, which is the real bioweapon that all this fake virus is all about. So, why coronavirus? Well, in March of 2020, I was sent a long and detailed email that was written by a US medical scientist. And he called it in March 2020. And first of all, he answered, why a coronavirus? Why did they pick a coronavirus? Why was Event 201 about a coronavirus pandemic, the Gates thing? He wrote this in the email. If you want to create a totally false panic about a totally false pandemic, pick a coronavirus. They are incredibly common, and there's tons of them. A very high percentage of people who have become sick by other means, flu, bacterial pneumonia, anything, will have a positive PCR test. There are hundreds of thousands of flu and pneumonia victims in hospitals throughout the world at any one time, which you can then redesignate COVID-19 when it's not. And the Chinese came out, first of all, again, it's all out of China, and they said, it's a virus. They called it SARS-CoV-2. But they never proved that it was a virus. They just said it. And to show that a infectious disease is causing the infectious disease you say it is, you take it through what's known as Koch's postulates that were developed in the 1890s by a German, Robert Koch. And what you do is this. If a microorganism is the causative agent of an infectious disease, it must be found in abundance in all organisms suffering from the disease, isolated from a diseased organism and grown in pure culture, able to cause disease when introduced into a healthy specimen, re-isolated from the inoculated diseased experimental host and identified as being identical to the original pathogen. That's how you show, for instance, that SARS-CoV-2 was causing what they call COVID-19. Never done. Never done, never has been done to this minute. Then there's this guy, Thomas Milton Rivers. Red flag, big red flashing lights, director of the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research between the 30s and the 50s, and known as the father of virology, which is red light because viruses have been used to such an extent of manipulation by this cult. And he said it is obvious that Koch's postulates have not been satisfied in viral diseases. That's any viral diseases, to show that any virus causes any disease. And then he says it is not obligatory to demonstrate the presence of a virus in every case of a disease produced by it. What? So how do you know that it's been produced by it? The arena of virology is a joke. And he developed a much less stringent way of, he claims, proving that a virus is causing disease, and that was never done with SARS-CoV-2. It says 40 here, but it's many, many more now. Some 40 Freedom of Information requests all over the world asking for evidence that SARS-CoV-2 exists have produced no evidence that it exists. None. There's not a scientific paper on planet Earth that shows that this SARS-CoV-2 has been isolated and purified and showed to be the pathogen they claim. This is a more recent one in the last 10 days. In Spain, Ministry of Health confirms it has not isolated SARS-CoV-2 virus and admits tests by themselves are not usually sufficient to determine the disease. So why is everyone that tests positive with a test not testing for it called a COVID case worldwide? China's top CDC, the equivalent of the CDC in America, epidemiologist, confirms that China has never isolated the SARS-CoV-2 so-called COVID-19 virus. I'm going to play this and I'm going to let it run 3 or 4 times so we just get the gist of this. This is from the start. This is when they're claiming that SARS-CoV-2 exists.
Why has the data not been shared?
No, they didn't isolate the virus. That's the issue. No, they didn't isolate the virus. That's the issue. No, they didn't isolate the virus. That's the issue. No, they didn't isolate the virus. That's the issue.
So how can you test for and produce a vaccine for a virus you have never isolated and purified and shown to exist as the cause of COVID-19? You can't, because it's a bloody scam at that level, to that extent. And this man, an American doctor and psychologist and psychiatrist, Andrew Kaufman, was one of the real early people that was sus that something wasn't right here, that this virus was not being shown to exist. And he points out that what the Chinese did is they took lung fluid full of all kinds of gunge and what they claimed was a virus, and they said they found that it had an RNA code 80% the same as SARS-CoV-1, we'll call it, which was also never isolated and purified and shown to exist. And so they said, we'll call it SARS-CoV-2. But an 80% code, even if that's true, is irrelevant. Humans are 96% genetically similar to chimpanzees. I think I notice a difference somehow. Even 60% similar to a banana. So 80% is irrelevant. And as Kaufman said, if you find a partial 1% of a fingerprint, and you find someone with an 80% matched with a 1% partial fingerprint, would that secure a conviction? Well, of course not. And he also points out that something called an exosome, which is part of the body's response system to toxicity, being radiation or chemical toxicity, it releases these exosomes from the cells as part of this response. It looks remarkably like what they're claiming to be SARS-CoV-2. And the similarity doesn't end there. Diameter inside the cell, the same. Diameter outside the cell, same. The receptors on the cell that they lock into, same. Both contain RNA, and both are found in lung fluid that were taken from only a few patients in China. And here's HIV researcher. HIV, never isolated, shown to exist. James Hildreth, President and Chief Executive Officer of Meharry Medical College at Johns Hopkins University. The virus is fully an exosome in every sense of the word. And these are Kaufman's conclusions. He's not alone anymore, by the way. Respiratory and other illness produce exosomes, an immune system response that closely resemble what they call SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19. And exosomes and other contaminating genetic material can be picked up by the PCR test. Exosomes are not the cause of illness, they are a response to toxins in the cells. And when you look at this pandemic we were supposed to have of COVID-19, this is 2020. Oh God, I got a shock. These are 2020. And all those in maroon are years going back to 1943, and they're all higher excess mortality than in 2020. Where's the pandemic? This is COVID mortality exactly mirroring the natural mortality curve in the UK and India. Where's the pandemic in 2020? And even if you believe in this virus, the infection fatality rate is in different studies 0.23%, 0.15%, even as low as 0.04%. Now take away the fake cases with a PCR test not testing for the virus. Take away the fake death certificates from the test when you die of something else. And what are you left with from those figures? Zero. Why? Because there is no virus. There never has been. Do any viruses cause disease? Well, this is Dawn Lester and David Parker in a book called What Really Makes You Ill, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease is Wrong. And they point out the official definition of a virus also claims that viruses are causes of many diseases, as if this has been definitively proved. But this is not the case. There is no original scientific evidence that definitively demonstrates that any virus is the cause of any disease. None of the existing documents provides proof that supports the claim that viruses are pathogens. Well, if what we call viruses are an immune response to toxicity, well, they're not going to, are they? And in this book, Perceptions of a Renegade Mind, I quote doctors describing, it's a head shaker, describing how the process they go through to prove, they say, that a virus causes disease. It's a bloody shocker. It's comic book. It's juvenile. It's an insult to the intelligence. And that's how they claim also SARS-CoV-2 is supposed to exist. So what is SARS-CoV-2 really? It's a computer program. All these things we see, all the spikes on and stuff, it's this COVID. It's a computer-generated image. They all are. Where's the natural virus? Let's see it. So these are different ways of researching these things. One's called in vivo and one's called in vitro. And they are different ways. One's in a laboratory. The other one's using natural host like an animal or whatever, a human. But there's another one, and it's called in silico. And this is how they created SARS-CoV-2, in silico, in silicon, in a computer. Definition of in silico. Done in or on a computer or produced by using computer software or simulation. By computer modeling, God help us. This is how they came across and produced the code they're claiming is SARS-CoV-2. On a computer, by taking different elements of a gene bank and fitting it together on a computer and claiming this is the virus. They've never isolated and purified in a natural state to show it exists, never mind get the bloody code. So what we're looking at with SARS-CoV-2 is literally a computer virus, not a natural one that invades the body. And if you've got a pseudo-virus, which is what it is, then you can only have a pseudo-vaccine, which is what we have, fake vaccine. And so when I read this, rare genome sequencing almost certainly proves COVID-19 was deliberately made in a Chinese lab before it was leaked to the world. Well, it's rare genome sequencing, and it was man-made because it was produced on a bloody computer. Not because it was leaked from a lab. And here we go. Here we have the Centers for Disease Control and the Food and Drug Administration in America confessing they had no virus when they concocted the test for the virus. And it's the same everywhere. Have you got any natural virus? Oh, no. Just a computer. So this is a journalist, John Rappaport, I've known for a very, very long time, back into the, 1990s. And he was on the case from a very early stage that this virus didn't exist as well. And this is what he wrote about that FDA document that was admitting they'd never had a proper virus to develop the test. This amazing FDA document goes on to say that the agency has granted emergency approval to 59 different PCR tests since the beginning of the fake pandemic. 59, and, quote, it is not feasible to precisely compare the performance of various tests that use contrived specimens because each test validated performance using samples derived from different gene-specific synthetic or genomic nucleic acid sources. Translation, as John says, each of the 59 different PCR tests for SARS-CoV-2 told different lies and concocted different fabrications about the genetic makeup of the virus we didn't have. Obviously then, these tests would give unreliable results. 59 tests using different codings to decide if you've got SARS-CoV-2 or not. It's never been shown to exist. Insanity. And this crook, Christian Drosten, a virologist in Germany, he comes out miraculously in January 2020, just as this thing started to kick off in the West, with a PCR test to test for SARS-CoV-2. With SARS-CoV-2, mate, it can't be tested for with a PCR test, all right? Not that you care. And immediately, the World Health Organization, without any peer review of this test protocol, recommended it to all its member countries worldwide. And that is what started producing cases that weren't cases at all. And here we go. The original Corman-Drosten paper with this protocol to test for SARS-CoV-2 admits they used a theoretical virus sequence for the PCR protocol and say, like the CDC and every government and agency, that this was done because no isolated natural virus was ever made available. Why? Because there isn't one. And this guy's recommending it, this Gates frontman, is recommending it to all the countries. And that's where the cases came from, and by definition, the deaths. And the World Health Organization, Gates, has been running the National Health Service, the CDC, the FDA, and all these national health systems worldwide. And here is a document sent to the National Health Service in Britain by the World Health Organization, telling them how to respond to the virus. And look at this one. Virus isolation is not recommended as a routine diagnostic procedure. Because they know that if there was an honest isolation attempt of this diagnostic procedure, they'd find there was no virus. And why wouldn't you want to routinely isolate the virus to show that it's actually causing what you say it is? And so, over 18 months, we've been told the world has been enveloped by a virus never shown to exist. So why? Why have a make-believe virus? Well, because if you release a genuine pathogen, dangerous pathogen, then you've lost control of it immediately. You don't know where it's going, you don't know who it's going to hit, you've lost control of it. And I'll tell you, having tracked this cult for 31 years now, their worst nightmare is losing control of anything. That's why they want to control both sides, to be assured of what the outcome's going to be. If they were running a football team, they would not be able to live with only controlling one team. They'd have to control both teams and the referee to know what the result was going to be before it started. So there's no way that they were going to lose control of a pathogen. But if you have a make-believe one, which you make seem to exist by manipulating your tests and your death certificates, then you can make it do what you bloody like. You can give it all the symptoms you want. Notice how the symptoms of COVID-19 have got longer and longer and longer. And notice that since all the catastrophe effects, consequences from these fake vaccines have started with heart problems and all that stuff. The alleged symptoms and consequences of SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, have encompassed what the vaccines are causing. If you don't have a virus, you can do that. If you don't have a pathogen, you can do that. And you can also do something else. You can invent as many new strains, mutants, as you like. They don't have to exist, just like your original doesn't exist. You make them up, but people will believe you, and then you can justify more of what you want to do because a new deadly variant, the variant of the variant is now upon us. So a reprise of how. Blueprint, China. Set the stall out for how you respond to the virus. Create the illusion of the virus in the first place. World Health Organization says China's way is the way everyone else throughout the world should respond. And it dictates to all national health pyramids and hierarchies. So the Chinese model and the World Health Organization model is imposed upon the people of the UK, the US, Canada, Europe, Asia, Africa. And the different hierarchies in different countries impose the World Health Organization response upon their country. And the doctors, they just keep repeating, because if they don't, then as we've seen, they'll lose their job and careers. It's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID. And it becomes a mind virus. Well, I've got a sniffle. That's COVID. I had a sniffle last year. Well, that was COVID. Well, I had a sniffle in 2019. Well, that was probably an early part of COVID. In 2018. Oh, no, that was the flu. Madness. And how they are deciding you have COVID-19 is symptoms and a test. Symptoms. What did they say in China? Flu-like symptoms. Oh, that mean like the flu then. And these symptoms of COVID-19 are the symptoms of a vast range of other ailments, making the re-diagnosis to COVID-19 of something else a piece of cake, child's play. And then they have the test. And that's the test, not testing for the virus, and because it can't. And then you have the lateral flow test, which is so bloody useless. This is going up the noses of kids, etc. Is so bloody useless that if you test positive, you have to have a PCR test, not testing for the virus, to check if that is lateral flow test is accurate. The PCR test does not measure the quantity of an alleged virus or pathogen. It only measures for genetic material. It cannot tell if you are sick. This is from the creator of it. And the medical scientist in that email in March of 2020 wrote this: PCR does not test viral load and therefore can't determine if a virus is present in sufficient quantities to sicken you. If you feel sick and get a PCR test, any random virus might be identified even if they aren't at all involved in your sickness, which leads to false diagnosis. That's the whole idea. And it's been seen sometimes in the media that these tests could be picking up other things and not the virus. So this fraudulent test is the foundation of it. The whole COVID scam is coming from this, and has been from day one, the moment it was introduced. Because this gave you the cases, and from the cases you get the deaths through re-diagnosis. German physician Dr. Klaus Kohlin, I don't believe it's a new virus, it's just a new test. Hamburg doctor Mark Fidicki, you could turn a man falling down the stairs into a virus victim, it's a kind of magic. Yeah, it's called lying. Infectious medical science specialist, Dr. Sucharit Bhakti. These measures, talking about lockdown, are leading to self-destruction and collective suicide because of nothing but a spook. And then we come to this part of the scam, amplification. What the PCR test does is very simply, as Kerry Mullis said, it makes lots of somethings out of something. So you take a tiny piece of genetic material, which you're testing, and the PCR test makes lots and lots of copies of it. It's called amplification. And the more copies you make, the more sensitive the test becomes to the genetic material. In other words, the more positives you're going to get, not for a virus, but for different elements of this genetic material, many of which we have in our bodies as a matter of course. So even Fauci in America said, Fauci said if you go above 35 cycles, it's actually not the case in terms of the overall picture, but let's go with what he said. If you go over 35 cycles of amplification of the test, then everything above that, the test is irrelevant, because you can't say that it's accurate because of the amplification's too high. The National Health Service in Britain and many others around the world have been using 45 cycles of amplification of the PCR test. And at least one, or now I've heard of another, laboratory was using 50 cycles. As somebody said, a stone would test positive for SARS-CoV-2 or the PCR test at those levels of amplification. And that's why when the Tanzania government sent off specimens from a goat and a pawpaw fruit, and a German politician sent off a specimen from a glass of cola for PCR testing, it came back positive for SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19. And then in January, actually it was on Biden's inauguration day, in January, this guy, Tedros, head of the World Health Organization, announced that the amplification of the PCR test, and I've said a word all the way through since it started, January 2021, the amplification needs to be lowered. This was just as the fake vaccine was being played out. And they wanted to have the cases fall to give the impression that the vaccine worked, so more and more people would have it. So, World Health Organization's updated guidance for PCR COVID-19 testing will likely lower positive cases. That was in January 2021. Update February 2021. COVID-19 positive cases down 62% since World Health Organization updated PCR guidance. You want lots of cases? Up the amplification. You want fewer cases? Lower the amplification. That's as simple as it is. How do the tests for coronavirus work? They bloody well don't. And this is why this guy and these people like Whitty in this country and Fauci in America have been going on about test, get tested, we want to go back to normal. Because they know that the more you get tested, the more cases you're going to get, not of the virus, but from the PCR test, testing for something else. You saw these videos being put out by the government with nurses saying, get tested and let's get back to normal. When the government knew the more people get tested, the more we wouldn't go back to normal because they'd have more tests, which say we must have more fascism. So this is the case scam. You massively increase the number of tests with a test not testing for the virus. You know that you'll get lots more cases from the test not testing for the virus. And then you claim that all these new cases mean you have to impose further fascist laws on the population. So what about the deaths? Let me have a little sip. What about the deaths? Well, that comes from the PCR test. Whenever have you had a case of testing for something, even inaccurately, and then whatever you die of being designated something else? And they've designated deaths from symptoms, first of all, and then when the test came in, from the test. Within 28 days of a positive test with the test not testing for the virus, COVID-19 goes on the death certificate. That's where the death numbers have come from. Dr. Malcolm Kendrick from the NHS in England. I do know that other doctors put down COVID-19, this is in 2020, put down COVID-19 on anyone who died from early March onwards. not died from COVID-19, died of anything from March onwards. The UK Chief Scientific Advisor, another man you wouldn't buy a new car from, never mind a used one. But he said, COVID is the death on the death certificate doesn't mean COVID was the cause of death. So why does it go on the figures as the cause of death? Illinois Public Health Director Dr. Ngozi Icke, if you were in a hospice and given a few weeks to live, and you were then found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. There might be a clear alternative cause, but it is still listed as a COVID death. So everyone listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. No! That they tested positive with a test not tested for it at the time of death. Feds classifying all coronavirus patients as deaths of COVID-19, deaths regardless of cause. Florida COVID-19 fatalities data included a man who died in a motorcycle accident. Grand County, Colorado coroner, 40% of the COVID-19 deaths were actually victims of gunshot wounds. And where did the flu go? What's flu got? All flu-like symptoms. This is Australia. This is the flu in Australia in 2019. This is the flu in Australia in 2020. The flu's disappeared. No. It's been redesignated COVID-19 because they haven't got a virus. For the first time in 36 years, there will be no flu season in South Africa. But South Africa hit 500,000 confirmed COVID cases, still not at the peak. It's unbelievable. It's in plain sight. Didn't say that on the BBC, though, did they? COVID magic, the fake diagnosis scam. This is what the medical scientists said in March 2020. Since you already selected the sickest flu cases, a fairly high proportion of your sample will go on to die. You can then say this new virus has a case fatality rate higher than the flu, and use this to infuse more concern and do more tests, which will of course produce more cases, which expands the testing, which produces yet more cases, and so on and so on. Before long, you have your pandemic. And all you have done is use a simple test kit trick to convert the worst flu and pneumonia cases into something new that doesn't actually exist. And he called it in March 2020. And this is Wuhan, if you can see it in there somewhere, one of the most polluted cities in the world, where naturally you would expect is enormous amounts of respiratory disease. And that's where they played their card to give the illusion of the existence of COVID. But China's a long way away from the West. It's a very different culture to the West. And we're trying to scare the shit out of the West into compliance. So you can do all the stuff you like out of China, and all the footage, and it will have an effect, yes. But it's still a long way away. What you have to do as part of this PSYOP is to have an example in the West to frighten the said shit out of the West, people of the West. So they chose Northern Italy, which just happens to have an appalling atmosphere and lots of respiratory disease in the area known as Lombardy. And so we had the crisis in Italy. Now, the crisis in Italy was merely to give a Western fear base to Western people so that they would say, well, this is not China, this is Italy. If it's Italy, this could happen to me. That was the psychology. And so we had this. This tsunami has overwhelmed us. Doctors reveal the horrors of Italian hospitals where coronavirus war has exploded and dying patients have to be left untreated as medics work day and night while experts warn UK and US public they are not scared enough. That's the whole point. Get them in fear and they'll do what you want. And then, after this has happened, and the West has been terrified, this happened. 99% of those who died from virus had other illnesses, Italy says. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 or more other what they call comorbidities, reasons to die. And then came this. Italian authorities, this is after all the propaganda, and we were in lockdown, it all kind of worked. Italian authorities found no clear COVID-19 cause of death in 88% of deaths attributed to coronavirus. Professor Walter Ricciardi, scientific advisor to Italy's Minister of Health, said, "The way in which we code deaths in our country is very generous." Oh, yes. In the sense that all the people who die in hospitals with the coronavirus are deemed to be dying of the coronavirus, testing positive with a test not testing for it. On revaluation by the National Institute of Health, only 12% of the death certificates have shown a direct causality from coronavirus. So what happened to all that crisis and madness in Italy? All of it was created to frighten the crap out of you. And this is more recent, this is this week. Italian Higher Institute of Health adjusts number of deaths due to COVID alone since February 2020, downwards from over 130,000 to under 40,000. Well, actually, bring it down to zero and you're getting somewhere near the truth. And here we have CDC in America quietly edit death tolls. Less than 6% of alleged 150,000 plus deaths were really COVID. And so, with these, if you believe in it, infection to fatality rates, take all that stuff off, and what are you left with? Zero. There is no virus. And this psychopath was claiming 3.4% infection to death rate at the start of this when he was trying to frighten the life out of people all over the world into conforming. And that's the real figure for COVID deaths and infections with SARS-CoV-2. And even by these figures, if you believe in it, the idea that this, well, I can't even say psychopath because it just doesn't cut it, can call it a once-in-a-century pathogen, all to frighten you into submission. So how to make COVID go away? Simple, simple. How to make COVID go away? Stop having tests. And then you won't test positive with a test not testing for it, and you won't be a case that isn't a case. Stop fixing death certificates, and no one will die from COVID-19. And because they didn't have a test or a virus, because the test was providing the illusion of it, they had to manufacture, on both sides of the Atlantic, the first wave of COVID deaths to give the illusion that a pandemic was really underway. And the first wave was killing people with drugs and calling it COVID. If you've not come across this, I warn you, it's a shocker. The UK's COVID first wave in the spring of 2020 was brought about by an end-of-life drug sedative called midazolam. And this cult-owned psychopath and mass murderer, Matt Hancock, the health secretary at the time, organized a massive order, 2 years worth, of midazolam in this same period, which was used in unprecedented numbers to take out vast numbers of old people in care homes. Traits of a psychopath: no empathy, no remorse, no shame, pathological liars. Spring 2020, National Health Service in Britain wrote to all hospitals on the order of the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, telling them to free up the maximum possible number of beds by urgently discharging any patients they could. Old people were discharged to care homes. If that old person is in hospital, they're bloody ill, but they're sent out to care homes. The NHS cancelled all non-urgent treatments. There was, following, no massive input of COVID patients. Bed occupancy in the National Health Service fell from the usual 90% to an average of 63%. But there was also a huge decrease in attendance at accident and emergency departments, and patient admissions fell significantly. So taking all those old people out into care homes from hospital was not because of a COVID input. And the hospitals in that period were so empty, we had all these dancing nurses dancing through empty hospitals. And we were told that the hospitals were overrun with COVID patients. They lie to you, ladies and gentlemen. They lie to you all the time. When their lips are moving, they are lying. Whatever they tell you, you invert it and you'll get closer to the truth. So all this is going on while we're told the hospitals are overrun with COVID and there's a first wave. Wait for this. Nothing to do but dance. What, during a pandemic? And all the time this is going on, the performing seals are coming out of their house in Britain, clapping the NHS as heroes. What, on TikTok? So, murder by midazolam. The justification of getting those old people out of hospital, absolutely unjustified by the figures alone. So, Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who gave the order to discharge those patients, secured vast quantities of the drug midazolam in the same period, including 2 years' supply from France. Midazolam is an end-of-life sedative used by some US states in the execution process. 2 years' worth of midazolam was purchased in March 2020, but at the same time, operations were cancelled for a minimum of 3 months. Therefore, midazolam was not required for use in sedation prior to operations, which released even more to kill people. So we had this to and fro in a Zoom version of the House of Commons in this same period, where this Matt Hancock and this MP called Luke Evans, a doctor, talked about a good death, how to give people a good death. A good death is a direct translation from the Greek word euthanasia. How do we give people a good euthanasia? Using midazolam and morphine. This is the exchange. Dr. Evans, a good death, Greek euthanasia, needs 3 things: equipment, medication, and the staff to administer it. On equipment, do you have enough syringe drivers? These are the technology that drive drugs in a way that they are programmed to do, like midazolam, so they don't have to keep coming up and doing it individually. On equipment, do you have enough syringe drivers in the NHS to deliver medications to keep people comfortable when they're passing away? Yes, we have, said Hancock. A challenge was raised about that 8 days ago. It was not as big a challenge as was made public, and we have resolved it. Yes, right now we have enough. Evans, the syringe drivers are used to deliver medications such as midazolam and morphine. Do you have any precautions in place to ensure that we have enough of those medications? And he goes on to say, yes, we've basically had this big order, and thus we've got enough. So this is what followed. The Health Foundation said that prescribing of midazolam increased in this same period, the spring of 2020, by more than 100%. Data shows that up to the 13th of May 2020, deaths in care homes from all causes were 159% higher than at the start of the COVID-19 outbreak. In April 2020, the ratio of excess deaths in English care homes was almost 3 times that of the previous 5 years' average. During the same month, 6 out of 10 people who died from, quote, COVID-19 were disabled because they were being treated the same. The Office of National Statistics said the largest effect was associated with living in a care home or other communal establishment. If they'd got control of you, you were getting the end-of-life treatment. So here, in this exact period, is the massive increase in midazolam prescribing, thanks to what Hancock had ordered. And that's the same period that thousands and thousands of old people were dying in care homes, having been given midazolam. According to official data, In April 2019, up to 21,977 prescriptions for midazolam were issued, containing 171,952 items, the vast majority being midazolam hydrochloride. However, in April 2020, 45,033 prescriptions for midazolam were issued, containing 333,229 items, the vast majority being midazolam hydrochloride. That's a 104.91% increase in the number of prescriptions issued for midazolam, and 93% increase in the number of items they contained. But these weren't issued in hospitals, they were issued by GP practices, which can only mean one thing: they were issued for end-of-life care. So, how about this for a coincidence? Midazolam induces significant depression of respiration. UK regulators insist midazolam should only be administered in a hospital or doctor's office under the supervision of a doctor or nurse to monitor the breathing of the patient in order to provide life-saving treatment to the patient if breathing slows or stops. Midazolam should be used with extreme caution in elderly patients. The US National Library of Medicine: midazolam injection may cause serious or life-threatening breathing problems, such as shallow, slowed, or temporary stop breathing, that may lead to permanent brain injury or death. You should only receive this medication in a hospital or doctor's office that has the equipment that is needed to monitor your heart and lungs and to provide life-saving medical treatment quickly if your breathing slows or stops. Your doctor or nurse will watch you closely after you receive this medication to make sure that you are breathing properly. Well, that never bloody happened. But here's the scam, therefore. And they called this the first wave of COVID in Britain, because they didn't have a virus, they didn't have a COVID-19, so they had to give the illusion of it. And they did it by killing old people. Number one, you get the elderly out of the hospital. Number two, you give them midazolam to create respiratory distress. Three, when they die, you call it COVID-19. When thousands die, you call it the first wave of COVID. Data from the Office of National Statistics reveals that during April 2020, there were 26,541 deaths that occurred in care homes, an increase of 17,850 on the 5-year average. This is half the amount of alleged COVID-19 deaths during the same period. Mass murder. Most alleged COVID deaths have occurred in people aged 90 plus. The next age group with the most deaths being 85 to 89, then 80 to 84, and so on. There's a general decrease in the number of deaths to the 65-69 age group, but then we see a dramatic fall to pretty much zero in anyone aged under the age of about 60. Average age of a COVID death is higher than the average life expectancy. So why did COVID kill the old and not the young? The fake vaccines are now killing the young, but before that, before the fake vaccines appeared, it was killing old people almost exclusively and not the young. Why? Well, the older you get, the more people die. The older you get, the more ailments you get that can kill you. So the potential for redesignation of diagnosis from what really killed you to COVID-19 is almost infinite in the very elderly. The young, before the fake vaccine, very few died. So the potential for redesignation to COVID-19 was very, very limited. And that's why COVID appeared to kill old people, but not the young. The British Lung Foundation reports that the majority of cases of pneumonia occur in those who are aged 81 and over. In 2012, 1,838 people in every 100,000 people over the age of 81 developed pneumonia. This equates to around 60,000 people over the age of 81 in today's numbers. Redesignation to COVID-19, piece of cake. And then we had the do not resuscitate orders. In this same period, they're giving off this midazolam stuff. they were issuing do not resuscitate orders on all and sundry, old people and the disabled, which means, of course, that if they needed resuscitation, they weren't going to get it. They're going to allowed to die. Elderly people pressured to sign do not resuscitate forms in case they get coronavirus. Mass murder. Son slams inhumane care home staff for refusing to let him visit his dying mother, 89, who has dementia, while she was still able to recognize him. This is a story that relates to the fact that in this same period where they're killing old people with midazolam, the loved ones of these old people weren't allowed to visit them and therefore potentially intervene and see what was going on. Mass murder by the British government. This is a nurse at a care home who wrote this to davidicke.com. I think he was a friend of Gareth's in the height of this. And he wrote this: I'm seeing firsthand now what's going on at the nursing homes, including mine. It's murder, mate. I'm not saying it lightly. I'm willing, once this is done, to go on the record with these bastards. If there is any information I can give you, I will help. Well, I've seen firsthand how the community matrons and doctors following orders basically just denying treatment to residents on the account they have COVID. No test, no nothing. Doctors are now not coming into my home to examine anyone. I've had an absolute murder with people begging to be placed on antibiotics. In a few weeks, you're going to see fucking dead old people all over the place. I'm done, mate, to be honest. Once this is over, this is not what I became a nurse for. We'd never let Nazi Germany happen again, would we? Care home residents account for up to half COVID-19 deaths in Europe. It was going on everywhere, including America. Alzheimer's Society. Lockdown isolation causes shocking levels of decline for people with dementia who are rapidly losing memory, speech, and the ability to dress and feed themselves. Mass murder of the elderly. Kissinger's useless eaters. Doctors issuing unlawful do not resuscitate orders for disabled COVID patients. Nazi Germany. Killing the infirm, killing the disabled, killing those with learning difficulties. Unprecedented number of DNR orders for learning disabilities patients. The Care Quality Commission found that 34% of those working in health and social care were pressured into placing do not attempt cardiopulmonary resuscitation orders on COVID patients who suffered from disabilities and learning difficulties without involving the patient or their families in the decision. Oversaw mass murder. Has to go to jail for the rest of his life. Matt Hancock. And all that played a part in it. And then there was America. Same thing. Nursing home scandal. And the drug of choice in America was called remdesivir. Remdesivir. And this provided America's COVID first wave because they never had a virus to do it for them. This cult-owned mass murderer and psychopath, Anthony Fauci, insisted that remdesivir be the only treatment for alleged COVID-19, i.e. someone who's tested positive with a test not testing for the virus. And this is a psychopath who has funded research that involves cutting the vocal cords of dogs so they can't bark and forcing them to be eaten alive by sandflies. This is a psychopath who has funded horrific experiments on children. And Americans, in about half of America, look to this guy as a freaking god. Oh, save me, Anthony. He's a psychopath. This American doctor, Brian Ardis, has been really on this case. He said Fauci mandated that all hospitals and medical doctors had to use this treatment of remdesivir, and the only treatment to be used. Remdesivir killed tens of thousands in New York and other places through blocking kidney function and was called the American first wave of COVID. New York hospital doctors immediately began to report that so-called COVID-19 patients were suffering from acute kidney failure, which they had never seen from a viral infection before, because it weren't being caused by a viral infection. They were getting acute kidney failure within 3 to 5 days of treatment starting, and they said, never seen a virus do this to kidneys. You might remember in the early days of this guy, very brave guy, Dr. Cameron Kyle Sidell, came out on a video, then, of course, deleted by the fascist YouTube and Susan Wojcicki, who runs it for the cult. And he said, we're treating the wrong disease. We were told to expect a viral disease, but this is not what we're seeing. We're looking at the lungs of these patients, and it's like they've been caught in a depressurization at 30,000 feet or on top of a mountain without oxygen. They were treating the wrong disease. Dr. Ardis discovered that the American authorities had brought up all remdesivir reserves, see midazolam in Britain. He points out that the highest alleged COVID death rates in the same period were in America because they were poisoned to death by remdesivir. He calls it Fauci's genocide. Fauci knew for at least 2 years that the drug was deadly. The one he insisted had to be given to COVID patients because they didn't have a real virus. They had to give the illusion of it. So Ardis found 2 studies quoted on the Fauci US National Institute of Health website in support of its use. The first study into remdesivir was for its use for Ebola. It had the highest death rate of the drugs trialed and was pulled from the study. The second study, quoted by Fauci, a study by Gilead Sciences, the makers of remdesivir. This study involved 53 patients allegedly with COVID-19 over just a 28-day period. 22% suffered from some of 4 main effects from this drug: multiple organ failure, acute kidney failure, septic shock, and hypertension, low blood pressure. Another 8% were taken off the drug within 10 days because of its toxic effect on multiple organs. So that's 30% suffering from life-threatening effects in a study by the makers, quoted by Fauci in support of the mandated use of alleged COVID-19 or on alleged COVID-19 patients. Ardis explains how remdesivir poisoning was diagnosed as COVID-19. Shutting down the kidneys of these patients with remdesivir means that when their bodies could no longer remove water, the body accumulates water in the abdominal cavity and saturates the lungs. Doctors were looking at chest x-rays and saying it was secondary pneumonia, when in truth they were drowning these people in their own water. You are filling their lungs with water and they are drowning to death. And they called it COVID-19, the first wave in America. So, if you have a real virus, why do you need to fake your cases with a test not testing for the virus? Why do you have to fake your deaths with 28 days from any other cause if you've had a fake test? Why do you have to create your first waves using drugs like midazolam and remdesivir? Why do you have one treatment protocol for pneumonia and another for COVID positives, which will almost certainly lead to their deaths? And why, if you have a real pathogen and deadly agent, do you need to give incentive payments to diagnose for COVID-19? Because that's what they did. In America, hospitals have paid $4,600 for diagnosing regular pneumonia, $13,000 for diagnosing COVID-19 pneumonia with the same symptoms. And if a COVID-19 patient was put on a ventilator, which was almost certainly kill them, the hospital gets $39,000. There is no virus. The bioweapon is not the virus, it's the vaccine. The virus was just the excuse to introduce the bioweapon in the vaccine. Big Pharma is producing the vaccine, one of the biggest killing machines, if not the biggest, in human society. Organizations like Pfizer have been ordered to pay record-breaking fines of multiple billions for the most horrific abuse of human beings and misuse of their own drugs. And billions all over the world are putting their lives in the hands of these psychopaths. If that is not testament and proof of the power of perceptual programming, then I cannot think of anything more to describe it. Genocidal mass murder stage 2, the fake vaccine. The United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention definition of a vaccine. This is why I'm calling it a fake vaccine, because it is. A vaccine is a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, protecting the person from that disease. And that is so not a definition of what these fake vaccines do. They actually, as emails have been leaked to show, the CDC changed the definition of vaccine because COVID-19 vaccines didn't meet the original criteria of a vaccine. A vaccine that doesn't stop you getting a disease or passing it on. What? No one is claiming that it does. But you must get the fake vaccine to save people from getting it from you. When if you get the fake vaccine, it doesn't stop you passing it on, even if you believe in it. And here's Johnson in the last 10 days. The vaccine won't stop you being infected or passing it on. But at the same moment, he said, but get your booster. What's the booster? Well, it's more of the two that haven't worked. This is not about health. You are the trial. There have been no trials worth the name. And this is a leaked Pfizer contract with the government of Albania to supply the Pfizer fake vaccine. And this is what it says in the contract from Pfizer. The long-term effects and efficacy of the vaccine are not currently known, and that there may be adverse effects of the vaccine that are not currently known. It's mass murder, again. And you can't sue Pfizer or Moderna because they've been given immunity from prosecution for any of the effects of their shite. And what is this stuff they're putting in that's not a vaccine? It is self-replicating synthetic genetic material. They are infusing into people synthetic genetic material into a biological body. How does anyone think that's going to work out? German doctors and lawyers assess blood smears from people who have had COVID injections. Quote, for me, this is euthanasia. For me, this is mass murder, a crime on a grand scale, said one. This is blood as it's supposed to be. This is blood in a recently jabbed COVID jab recipient. Why would this not happen when you are infusing synthetic genetic material into a biological body and changing the nature of how it works? And they're talking about this spike protein. Oh, spike protein this, spike protein that. Well, the spike protein turns out to be very, very bad for the human body. And these fake vaccines are kind of tricking the body into producing it, so it's claimed. And they're saying we're doing that because of it mitigates the spike protein in the virus. This virus has never been isolated and purified and has never been shown to have spike proteins. It's a computer-generated image. And look at the stuff that has been found in some of these vials. What is it? All this material which seems to be alive. These are some of blood clots taken out of a fake vax patient. But this is self-replicating stuff. Once you've had it, it increases its impact upon the body by self-replicating. And what's very clear from people who have got hold of some of these vials and looked at them is that there are a large number of them that don't have the bad stuff in. They have saline material in it, just saline fluid in it. But the point is, you can't kill too many people too quickly, or maybe people might suss what's going on. But it's a lottery. It's a Russian roulette. You might have a saline solution for your first vaccine. You might even be lucky enough to have the second one. But the third one, what's the chances of that? You're not getting the bad stuff. And as more and more people have this vaccine and more boosters, because that's the idea, everyone's going to get caught in it eventually. Exclusive, 100% of COVID vaccine deaths were caused by just 5% of the batches produced according to official government data. This is the VAERS system in America of reporting adverse effects and deaths from vaccines. So when people say, oh, I didn't have any problem, I had no reaction at all, well, you probably got the saline then. But were you going to get it the next time and the next time? This is what this fake vaccine is all about. Mass depopulation, sterilization of the human form that we know today, and genetic transformation of those that are not mass depopulated. That's what this is all about. And all of those things have been in my books all these years, pointing out that this is the agenda that they want to introduce. And here we are staring at it, called COVID fake vaccines. Moderna had specific COVID-19 mRNA shot ready in 2019 before pandemic was announced. It goes back much further than that. It's been long planned. So, let's look at some of the real reasons for this. The real reasons for the fake vaccines. Number one, connecting humans to AI, artificial intelligence. Where this is planned to go is to create an artificial intelligence technocracy. And a technocracy is defined as government or control of society by an elite of technical experts, not elected politicians. They're designed to go. So this cult has been leading, as my books have been pointing out over the many, many years, to a point where the world is controlled by technology and by technocrats running that technology. And so we had the Internet of Things. Remember that? I mean, I remember writing in my books about warning about the coming Internet of Things and what that meant, and now it's everywhere. What I mean by that is everything's connected to the Internet, including increasingly your bloody car. And the idea has long been, as again my books have said for a long time, to create the next stage, which is the Internet of Everything, and that includes connecting humanity to this web, to this Internet, to this cloud. And these fake vaccines are fundamental to getting that connection. What they're building is a global control grid. This is why they're putting all these low orbit satellites up, projecting Wi-Fi, 5G, etc., at the Earth, because they want to cover every inch of the Earth with Wi-Fi, because everybody's supposed to be, planned to be connected to that Wi-Fi, to that what they call the cloud or the smart grid. And so connecting humanity to AI via the cloud is a long, long plan of this cult. And now they're putting stuff into the body via these fake vaccines to make that connection. This is Ray Kurzweil, a Google executive, so-called futurist. It's very easy to predict the future if you know what's coming. And he said, humans will have hybrid cloud-powered brains by 2030. He said, our thinking will be a hybrid of biological and non-biological thinking. Humans will be able to extend their limitations and think in the cloud. We're going to put gateways in the cloud in our brains. We're going to gradually merge and enhance ourselves. In my view, that's the nature of being human. We transcend our limitations. Load of crap. As the technology becomes vastly superior to what we are, i.e. the AI, then the small proportion that is still human gets smaller and smaller and smaller until it's just utterly negligible. The idea is to assimilate human awareness, human consciousness into AI. So AI becomes the human mind. With robots in our brains, Kurzweil says, we'll be superhuman, godlike. No. We'll be post-human and subhuman, and that's the idea. So up to this point, as I've talked about earlier, you control information to control perception to dictate behavior. This whole thing of connecting the human brain and the human body to AI, the cloud, is that perception will now come direct and AI becomes the human mind. No manipulation of information needed anymore after that. And this thing, am I talking about Zuckerberg or the metaverse? I don't know. Both are appropriate. Zuckerberg, another psychopathic gopher, boy child, serving the cult agenda, has been talking this week about the metaverse. Have you seen that? And the metaverse is where the physical and digital worlds come together. It's a space where digital representations of people interact. At the center of this universe will be virtual reality. All this is part of this assimilation of human consciousness into AI. So AI becomes the human mind. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to create this cloud, you need Wi-Fi everywhere so humans can be connected to it. And that's why psychopaths like Elon Musk are putting up these low orbit satellites, tens of thousands of them eventually, to beam this cloud at the earth and entrap the human mind. He says AI could be the end of humanity, but we must merge with it to save ourselves. Yeah, okay, I believe you. He starts a company called Neuralink to merge the brain with AI and says AI could be the end of humanity. I mean, this guy is no hero. My God, he's not. Understatement of the century, that is. So the smart grid is the cloud. This is why everything now seems to have smart in front of it. Smart television, smart phones, smart watches, smart meters, smart dust, smart pills, smart streets, smart cities, smart communities, smart cars, smart environments, smart cards, smart patches, smart skin, smart borders, smart pavements, smart growth, smart planet. And all these smarts technologically are designed to connect with each other into this one grid to which the human mind is to be connected, not least through these fake vaccines. And Kurzweil went on to talk about nanobots, nanotechnology, infused into all matter around us with information, rocks, trees, everything will become these intelligent creatures. They want to take over everything. This is why they are seeking to make everything synthetic. So something called smart dust or neural dust, digital dust, nanobots are defined as tiny electronic particles for wireless communication with each other and anything they connect with to create this grid. And here's the inventor of the mRNA technology who's spoken against it. Vaccine causes lipid nanoparticles to accumulate in organs and tissues. These nanoparticles are being put into the body through these fake vaccines. In fact, the nanoparticles are part of the process of tricking the cells in the immune system to let them in where they normally would reject them. How nanotechnology helps mRNA COVID-19 vaccines work? It works in that way, as like a Trojan horse technique. The point being that the body's being infused with all these nanobots, nanotechnology, which is self-replicating, and they're forming, and you can see these in some pictures from the vials, they are forming almost like neuron networks, which are part of the communication system with the cloud to override the neuron networks of the brain. This is what's going on inside people. And there's more and more all the time. And so they are connected through these various devices to this cloud, and the cloud starts doing their thinking for them, getting you to the smart grid or connecting you to the smart grid to control your mind. And American scientists have found toxic graphene oxide in these, some of these vials and these fake vaccines. And graphene is a superconductor of electricity. It's part of this whole connection as well as many other things. It's magnetic. Magnetic graphene forms new kind of magnetism. Again, all part of this connection to this smart grid and AI. What's that doing in frickin' vaccines for COVID? Real reasons for the fake vaccines. Number 2, the synthetic human, creating the synthetic human. They're phasing out this human into a synthetic human. I've been writing about this for so long, and here we are. Human 2.0. And it's in the mainstream media now that this is where we're going. And how is synthetic biology shaping the future of drug discovery? Well, synthetic biology is a massively expanding discipline now within mainstream science, because everything's becoming synthetic as part of this process of moving to a much more synthetic human, human 2.0. Synthetic biology, the branch of biology that involves undertaking large-scale manipulation of DNA sequences in order to modify biological systems to perform new functions, such as the production of drugs and the destruction of cancer cells. That's the selling point. Synthetic biology, the application of computer science techniques to create artificial biological systems. And that's what this mRNA synthetic genetic material in these fake vaccines is designed to do, is to change the body to create artificial biological systems to override the ones we have now. And this is why everything is becoming synthetic. Synthetic crops, synthetic this, synthetic everything. It's alive, but is it live? Synthetic biology and the future of creation. This is the process we're seeing in front of our eyes of turning the human body into something very different for those that survive the mass depopulation. Rapid development of a synthetic DNA vaccine for COVID-19. These fake vaccines are all part of this process. To develop a coronavirus vaccine, synthetic biologists try to outdo nature. They want to override what we call nature. So what's in my mRNA vaccine? Material to change the nature of your body. And a lot of people won't survive that process, and there's your depopulation. The effect of RNA on DNA means that mRNA vaccines can permanently alter your DNA. This is what is happening. And mRNA, what is it? Messenger RNA. The infusion of synthetic genetic material, mRNA, is changing the messaging system of the body. Now, when you're healthy, it's because, like with a healthy working computer, your messaging system from the brain through the cellular structure is in balance and in harmony, and it's communicating as it should. That's called health. But when that messaging gets knocked out of kilter, then obviously, like with a computer, when the messaging goes awry, the computer stops working properly. So does the body. And so what you've got with these fake vaccines is the potential, and we're already seeing it, to change the messaging system of the body in so many potential ways that the number of consequences and health consequences of these vaccines is simply endless, depending on how the mRNA messaging changes, or the messaging changes in general. So synthetic genetic rewiring that is self-replicating, that's what we're looking at. And the synthetic human they want to create will not have a sex, no sexes, and will not be able to procreate. It will be done, procreation will be done technologically, as described by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World as long ago as 1932. So welcome to the new world, kids. This is how the human race is designed to be created in the not too distant future. And Huxley described it in Brave New World, exactly what's going on now. Natural reproduction has been done away with, and children are created, decanted, and raised in hatcheries and conditioning centers from birth, people are genetically designed to fit into one of 5 castes, which are further split into plus or minus members and designed to fulfill predetermined positions within the social and economic strata of the world state. And the state would bring up the kids, which is why there's an attack on parenthood that is incessant. This is the maternity ward of the not too distant future. If we don't get our asses in gear fast on this, the dehumanization of the human race, which we're seeing all the time anyway, but it's designed to be technologically dehumanized. And what Huxley was describing in Brave New World in terms of artificial creation of life, human life, it's now happening. The very same technology is coming out to do this. The real reasons for the fake vaccine: 3, sterilizing human 1.0. If you want to bring in human 2.0, you want to destroy human 1.0. And so that's what's happening. And that's also what these fake vaccines are about too. They're operating on many levels. It's known that you can mass sterilize people through agents in vaccines. Doctors warn about COVID vaccine dangers to fertility, and the government says it doesn't know the impact on fertility. That's actually in a document, a government document. A registered nurse and certified medical investigator on the cancer-causing sperm and fertility-destroying DNA-changing ethylene dioxide used in COVID test swabs. It's not just the vaccines. This stuff you're putting up your nose is containing stuff to do this as well. And so, in this same period as we're moving from human 1.0 to human 2.0, alarming drop in sperm counts all over the world, particularly in the West. Poor quality Western diet, they're blaming it on, but there are many, many reasons for it. And this is a CNN article. If sperm was an animal, science might worry that it's heading towards extinction in Western nations. And Countdown, this is a book detailing the catastrophic collapse of sperm counts in males through gender-bending chemicals, the smartphones in the pockets, all these things. And testosterone, the male hormone, is also plummeting, which is why males are increasingly acting differently to what we've known before. Male fish are changing sex because of chemicals we flush down the drain. Why wouldn't that happen to humans? It is happening. And the idea is to fuse men and women into this human 2.0, which would have no genders, no sex. So it won't procreate. And it doesn't need to procreate, because that's designed to be done technologically. So when we see this, the future has no gender, the end of gender, that's actually literally true, but not what the transgender activists think. They're just a vehicle. They don't realize it. This is not about transgender. This is about no gender, the no gender human. Transgender rights are human rights, yeah. And so are everyone else's. And I mentioned at the start of this second section, Dr. Richard Day, on all those predictions he made, which have come true in 1969, one of the others he said was, we're going to make boys and girls the same. And that's exactly what they're doing. This is a part of bringing drag queens into schools and libraries to read books to small kids and do their strutting stuff. I've got nothing against drag queens. Do what you like, mate, as long as it makes you happy. But doing this to kids is being done for one reason. It's the process of confusing the perception of gender on the road to fusing gender into the no-gender human. And this is a story from this week. Primary school asked boys and teachers to wear skirts to class to promote equality. It's all part of the programming. And so we have the war on men. Why do we have the war on men? Well, they don't want testosterone men standing up to this stuff. And the war on men is because men are no longer necessary to procreate the species. And deleting toxic masculinity, as they say, is deleting the backbone to stand up to tyranny. That's why so many people around the world that have been pushing back on this have been women. University of Texas to treat masculinity as a mental health issue. This is the war. And I said when this was going on, they're going to turn on the women eventually, because women are not necessary either to procreate the species, just like males. And so now we're having women targeted. There's a war on women. And the transgender are at top of the hierarchy of political correctness because they represent, they don't realize it, they represent a stepping stone to the no gender human. And so we have women's sport destroyed by transgender people in male bodies. Break the binary for the 1%. These activists in the transgender movement, just like the activists in the climate change movement, are just pushing an agenda that the 1% wants to happen. Because there's one agenda and all these dots connect in the end. Real reasons for fake vaccines, mass depopulation. Been talking about this, writing about this, others have too, for many, many years, that this is the agenda. And the first target, therefore, of these fake vaccines is the human immune system. Because if you can undermine that, you're going to go down with lots of things that you otherwise wouldn't, because the immune system would sort them out. So that's why it's being pointed out that these fake vaccines are having a massive impact on the effectiveness of the immune system. Project Veritas in America, medical whistleblower goes public with secret recordings. This is evil at the highest level. The vaccine is full of shit. I think they wanted people to die. This is caught on tape in a hospital. Nurse on the jab, this is criminal, and patients dubbed COVID are really suffering the effects of the fake vaccine. Exactly the point I've been making for months, and like I say there, we've seen nothing yet. Funeral director, the jab is killing the elderly, not the virus. And if you look at the reporting systems in America and Britain for vaccine deaths and serious injuries, adverse reactions, it's up to well over 1 million adverse reactions in Britain, 1,700 deaths, and 700,000 adverse reactions, and 15,000 deaths in America. But as studies have shown, only about 1% of these adverse reactions and deaths are actually reported by doctors. So you've got to start multiplying this by anything up to 99%. Just call it multiplying it by 10 to those numbers, and you'll see something about what's going on. This is the VAERS system of reporting deaths from vaccine connections in America, and this is when the COVID vaccines, fake vaccines, were rolled out. And still we're giving them to kids. Freedom of Information Act request reveals there have been 4 times as many deaths in 8 months due to the COVID-19 fake vaccines than there have been due to all other vaccines since the year 2001. And this is a process of killing more and more people with more and more boosters and reasons to be fake vaccinated. A deadly pandemic of the fully vaccinated worldwide from 185 nations proves the highest COVID-19 death rates, actually death from the vaccine rates, are in the most vaccinated countries. And 45,000 dead, this whistleblower claims, within 3 days of vaccination. And this really does capture the scale of what we're looking at, covered up by the media, etc. This is a television station in America that asks for people to report those that were not vaccinated who died from COVID. They want to demonize the non-vaccinated. And what they got instead was well in excess of 200,000 reports from people of deaths and injuries from having the fake vaccine. And that gives you some kind of feeling for the mayhem and catastrophe that's going on out there. These are people speaking out this week, and they're being completely ignored by the media and government. And have you noticed all these young sports people, footballers, etc., who are suddenly collapsing on the pitch since they have these fake vaccines? And yet we're told it's a pandemic of the unfake vaccinated, when the very opposite is the case. So in the period of the vaccine rollout, the COVID vaccine rollout, global deaths from all causes are at unprecedented levels. I mean, hello. And the elephant in the living room is the vaccine. And every one of these statistics, every one of this data, amount of this data, is a human tragedy. And here's just one example. from the wife of an FBI special agent who had the fake vaccine. And this is what happened.
Do I trust everything and all scientists? Absolutely not. My husband, very much so, believed in freedom. So much that he went to work every day to support our freedoms and to fight for our freedoms. And you know what? He trusted science. He went and got his shot. He did before he had to, before it was told that you have to go get this. He did. And he would giggle at me and tell me, Ona, you're being silly. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Millions of people are getting them, and they're fine. We're going to be okay. Okay, so he took his shot. He got it, his first one. Within a couple hours, he didn't feel well. Went to sleep that night with a really, really bad headache. Told me he was fine. It was just a headache. I rubbed his feet. I gave him a wet washcloth. Filled his water. Checked on him a couple times when I heard him rustling around. He assured me he was fine. It was just a headache, a symptom of the shot, or a side effect of the shot. Okay, about 5 hours later, after the last time I talked to him, I found him blue and dead in our bed with his arm hanging off the side of the bed. Okay? Medical examiner has ruled it to be a coincidence. Purely a coincidence. Science, okay? I'm here to beg you, please, those that are fighting and speaking out against the mandates, please know that they are not doing it because they just don't want to give their arm for a shot. If we're told we have to do this, our freedoms are ripped from us.
And this is going on all over the world. Vaccine deaths are being hidden, suppressed, and falsely recorded. This is from South Africa. Young people's deaths after Pfizer vaccines, a new worry. That's from Korea. It's happening all over the world. And here's a nurse in Australia describing what's happening in one hospital.
Because we know this is ongoing. We know this is planned. We're not stupid. The hospitals are not full of COVID patients. The hospitals are full of vaccinated patients, okay? I've got friends that work in ICU at Flinders. 30 out of 38 patients currently are vaccinated. That is a fact, okay? The media is, I'm sorry, respectfully to the media, please start telling the truth and please help us help you because you are all targeted. Every single person is targeted.
So as a registered nurse, are you seeing people in hospital? Are you treating people?
Yes. Serious adverse effects. Serious. And we're talking 20-year-olds. We are talking 20-year-olds that have dropped dead. Nothing is getting on the media. Myocarditis is a rare, let me tell you, a rare cardiac condition. All of a sudden, every third 20-year-old's got myocarditis. You know what that leads to? Cardiac transplant. Where do we get hearts from in Australia with the lowest organ donor rate in the world?
Can you just clarify?
And then you have this army whistleblower talking about what happened when she stopped a number of pilots flying because of the effects of the fake vaccine. And if people say, well, yeah, we'd know about it if this was going on, well, look what happened to her for doing that.
With respect to aviation safety, risk communication is critical. I saw 5 patients in clinic, 2 of which presented with chest pain, days to weeks after vaccination, and were subsequently diagnosed with pericarditis and worked up to rule out myocarditis. The 3rd pilot had been vaccinated and felt like he was drunk, chronically fatigued within 24 hours after vaccination. The pilot told me he didn't know what to do, so he drank a lot of coffee to try and, quote, wake himself up and continued to fly until he realized it wasn't going away. After I reported to my command my concerns that in one morning I had to ground 3 out of 3 pilots due to vaccine injuries, the next day my patients were canceled, my charts were pulled for review, and I was told that I would not be seeing acute patients anymore, just healthy pilots there for their flight physical.
So this is what it's all about. Mass depopulation, sterilization of human 1.0, and the replacement with a genetically transformed human 2.0. And that's why they are using every opportunity they can to get more and more of this stuff into people in what they call boosters. So this guy wants every man, woman, and child fake vaccinated because that's the agenda, to transform and depopulate vast numbers of the human race. That's why it makes no sense. But it makes sense if you know that that's what the game is. So you must get it. You can have a donut, you can go into a lottery, you can be persuaded to by a bunch of hairhead bloody celebrities. Or, if that don't work, then we'll destroy your life to make sure you do. No Gates vaccine, no normal life. Get the vaccine or starve, says Biden. Vaccine mandate released. 84 million workers face January the 4th deadline to get vaccinated, fake vaccinated in America. This is fascism beyond anything in Nazi Germany. Cult-owned psychopath Fauci calls for unvaccinated Americans to be banned from air travel. Fascist Italy becomes first European country that requires all workers to have a health pass. In other words, have the fake vaccine. 60,000 UK care workers face losing their jobs after being told to get this fake vaccine. Why would they be doing this? Hot Mike catches Israeli health minister admitting vaccine passports are all about coercion. Of course they are. And to keep your passport, you have to have more and more of these fake vaccines or you lose it. And if you look at the European Union timeline for these vaccine passports, the process started before COVID was ever heard of. And he's got this internal system of fake vaccination monitoring and tagging called ID 2020. And this is China. What they do in China is you're so closely surveilled in real time, they know everything you do. And you're given credits, social credit scores, if you do what the government wants, and they're taken off if you don't do what the government wants. And if you lose enough, you can't fly, you can't go on trains, you can't do all this stuff. And the idea is that these fake vaccine passports are exactly equivalent to that. If you don't do what the government says, you lose your ability to interact with society and earn a living. And the idea is that they create, I've been writing about this for such a long time, they create a situation where people lose employment, they lose the ability to earn a living, and they go on a so-called universal basic income, now being trialed in Los Angeles and Chicago, not trialed, rolled out. And that means that you have no other means of earning a living, so you have your basic income from the government, but you only get it if you do exactly what you're told. And so you have the vaccine passport sting based on these fake vaccines. The trap. COVID booster shots will be needed every 8 months, says Fauci. Every year, says the psychopath Zahawi, the vaccine minister turned education secretary. Now they're talking about a fourth injection or even a fifth in Israel. And if you don't have them each in turn, you lose your vaccine passport. You could have 5 of them and say no to the 6th, and you go back in terms of your ability to interact with society to the level of someone who hasn't had any. All the time forcing you on to have more and more and more to keep the fake vaccine passport. Why? To get more of this shite into you to do all the things I've talked about. So Brits told to get booster jab if they want to go on holiday next summer. That's the third one then. Immunocompromised, we need a 4th in America. They're talking about a 4th for everyone there. Fully vaccinated definition may change to include booster shots. In other words, keep your passport. In Australia, this is globally cult orchestrated, thus the same is happening everywhere. This is how it works. In Australia, fully fake vaccinated to become unfake vaccinated if they fail to take all required COVID-19 fake vaccine booster shots. This is the human in the lead up to 2030. If we go on taking this shite, and all this for an infection fatality rate of negligible nature, even if you believe in the virus, and the average lifespan being 80 in men and 83 in women, and the average age of a COVID death being 82 to 83. If it was any more in your face, well, how could it be? And now they're giving it to the kids. Pfizer set to seek approval of its fake vaccine for US babies this winter. And given those that give permission and Pfizer are both owned by the same cult, they're almost certainly going to get it. Witty. Overturning recommendations from a vaccine advisory committee for 12 to 15-year-olds not to have it if they're healthy. He overturns it. Why? It's the cult agenda. That it happens, so it happens. Taking away the right of parents to intervene. So we get more and more kids fake vaccinated. And then, the real reason for fake vaccinations, finally number 5, there will be more. 5 sense isolation. I've talked to a lot of people who know loved ones and associates who've had this fake vaccine and who have had, clearly from their response, they've had the bad stuff, not the saline solution. And they describe their personality as changing, and then becoming like vacant is a word that's used often. And I've said all these years, and I've said today many times, the foundation of the cult agenda is to disconnect 5 sense mind from expanded consciousness. And those that I've seen quoted anyway, that are involved in this hands-on healing, this Reiki that operates and works with the other bodies, the other electromagnetic bodies of the human, say that the difference between before fake vax and afterwards is incredible. In the sense that afterwards there's this disconnection. And this is what Rudolf Steiner said 100 years ago. Rudolf Steiner was a very aware person behind the Steiner schools. And he had also connections as well into gleaning information and what's happening. And this is what he said 100 years ago. I've told you that the spirits of darkness are going to inspire their human hosts. This is this Wetiko reptilian stuff that I'm talking about. I've told you that the spirits of darkness are going to inspire their human hosts in whom they will be dwelling to find a vaccine that will drive all inclination towards spirituality out of people's souls when they are still very young. And this will happen in a roundabout way through the living body. With such a vaccine, you can easily make the etheric body loose in the physical body. Once the etheric body is detached, the relationship between the universe and the etheric body would become extremely unstable, and man would become an automaton. For the physical body of man must be polished on this earth by spiritual will. So the vaccine becomes a kind of Arimanaic force, evil force. Man can no longer get rid of a given materialistic feeling. He becomes materialistic of constitution and can no longer rise to the spiritual. So what we're looking at is this detachment that they've been working for all this time to isolate 5 sense mind in an almost permanent fashion. This is what they don't want to happen. This is what they want to happen. And this is part of these fake vaccines. It's becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. To hold our point of attention in isolation from the rest of our multidimensional self. So, how did they pull it off? From a psychological point of view, I'll be quick with this and we'll have a break. The subconscious gateway to the conscious mind. By getting into the subconscious, they get into the conscious and thus into behavior. You're feeling sleepy. What we tell you is real. This is why the psychologists and things like the Behavioral Insights team in Britain have been driving these COVID regulations. And it's all part of psychological transformation, not least through fear. Frighten people that this could be them, and they'll do what you say. And interestingly, children have a 0.0 chance of dying of COVID, but are harmed by life social distancing or for life, which has its roots in CIA torture techniques. Distancing and isolation, developed 70 years ago by the CIA, doubles the risk of death, destroys the part of the brain linked to learning. Masks have always been used to dehumanize people and be a symbol of control and submission. Kathy O'Brien, a great friend of mine, has described how her daughter Kelly, who I've also met, when she was in the MK Ultra mind control program in America, was forced to wear a mask from the age of 2 because of the effect on her psyche and her mind control, not least stopping enough oxygen getting to the brain to stop it developing properly. Michael Jackson was in an ongoing version of MK Ultra. That's why he did some strange stuff. And look at that period where he was always wearing a mask because of what it does to the psyche. And this is the uselessness of masks, because it's all psychology. This is on one of the mask boxes. They will not provide any protection against COVID-19 or other viruses or contaminants. So what the hell are they being forced on the population for? Psychological reasons. And these are 2 states in America, North Dakota, South Dakota. One had a mask mandate, one didn't. The effect on so-called cases was virtually the same, so they're useless. And this German neurologist has said that oxygen deprivation causes permanent neurological damage, and we're allowing kids to go to school every day with masks on. What the hell are we doing? What happened to parenthood? And yet, Mummy and Daddy says, put your nappy on, and so they do. God, it's pathetic. And you know, I came across this document. It's a mind control document. I came across it a long time ago in America. And it's a manual on how to mass mind control the population. It's called Silent Weapons for a Quiet War, silent weapons being psychological manipulation. And I always remember this line in it. If a person is spoken to as if he were a 12-year-old, then due to suggestibility, he will, with a certain probability, respond or react to that suggestion with the uncritical response of a 12-year-old. And that's why they talk to us like 12-year-olds or less. And if we fall for it, we've been Wetiko'd. A tendency by the vast majority to follow on mindlessly without resistance is another expression of Wetiko consciousness. And as Paul Levy says in one of his books, Wetiko psychosis is at the very root of humanity's inhumanity to itself, in all its various forms. As a species, we need to step into and participate in our own spiritual and psychological evolution, which means that we must focus our attention on and contemplate this most important topic before this virulent madness destroys us. And that was written before COVID. So the whole foundation of the control is to lock people into this Wetiko frequency, which has already completely overwhelmed those that are driving this COVID hoax. And therefore, you speak the words of Wetiko, believing them to be your own. And manipulating the population to herd and pen itself, like sheep controlling sheep. And that's what is happening here. Slaves putting on an illuminous jacket to impose the will of the masters on all the rest of the slaves. And you have these face-nappy foot soldiers for fascism called police officers who have families, they have kids who are being subjected to all this, who mindlessly, Wetiko-like, just follow orders no matter what those orders are. And this is part of the intimidation, the psychology of control in the COVID era, blatantly, is intimidation. Intimidating people through fear to do what they're told. This psychopath police officer in London kicking a guy in the head who's on the floor. And this moron in Australia that really captures this level of wetiko called law enforcement that enforces the cult's will upon the population, pushing what is an old lady over and then squirting in her face the stuff that's so horrible and painful. And the Hunger Games Society surveillance system has been allowed to be brought in, of course, because of COVID. That's another bonus. And another massive part of the psychology is to let you see the madness. This is very important. They want you to see the madness because if you see it's nonsense but do it anyway, they've controlled your or they've deleted your submission. They have taken away your self-respect. So it's not that they don't want you to see it's crazy, they do. It's called taking the piss. It's called removing your dignity. Because self-respect is what has ended every tyranny in history. The self-respect that says, no, I'm not obeying this, I'm not acquiescing to this. And once you delete self-respect, what's left is submission, subservience. And that's what they want. They want our self-respect. And so they want us to see it's crazy. Australian psychopaths order citizens to keep masks on while drinking alcohol. Anyone who does that has no self-respect. Anyone that allows their kids to do this has no self-respect. And all these instructions and impositions of the COVID era are designed to take our self-respect away, which is why we must not acquiesce to them. What they're trying to get us to do is accept that 2 and 2 equals 5 in Orwell's words. And what you do with 2 and 2 equals 5, when you first acquiesce to something you can see is crazy, you know 2 and 2 equals 5. But to save your self-respect, at least in your own mind, eventually you start to believe 2 and 2 equals 5 just to try to convince yourself that you're not acquiescing to something you shouldn't be acquiescing to. As Orwell said, the party told you to reject the evidence of your own eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. And we've got to not do that or it's over. And so, because of this psychological manipulation, systematic, we've had all these levels of anxiety, suicidal thoughts, addiction soaring in this pandemic. And part added on to this, let them see it's madness, but get them to do it anyway. You will have noticed that all around the world in this COVID era, more than any other time I can remember, complete morons are in positions of political power. And so this is another level of it. You let people see it's madness, and you let them see that morons are telling them to acquiesce to the madness. And if you do those two things, then self-respect is deleted. So this is why, one reason why, this senile guy is President of the United States, while this buffoon is Prime Minister of Britain, while this psychopathic buffoon was Health Secretary in the Midazolam era, while Daniel Andrews is running Victoria in Australia in a way that would make Hitler wince, while these two are running the show on a more global level, and certainly in America in Fauci's case. How's your self-respect doing? Acquiescing to what these people are telling you to do. Yes, sir, anything you say, sir. That's the way we got into this mess, and it's not the way we're going to get out of it. 2 and 2 equals 4, and we must not forget that or acquiesce to any other version of that. Otherwise, we are falling into the trap that's been set for us psychologically. And where does the conclusion come? Do we conclude what we believe at the start of the process, like the woke and so many people who were asleep in the COVID era? The government says it, so that's our conclusion. Or do we process information and come to the conclusion at the end of the process? That's the difference between the fast asleep and the awake. And it's the awake that are processing information into their own conclusion and not just taking it off the peg, that are the only group of people that are going to bring an end to this or can. And just very quickly, connected topically what's going on this week, connected into the COVID hoax is the climate change hoax, which is designed to reach the same end. Centralization of global power and total control over the fine detail of people's lives. So these two things, the fake virus and the fake human-caused climate change, are running to the same line of human control. And that's why these fake vaccination passports are green passes, because these two agendas are designed to fuse into human control. This is why the same people pushing the COVID hoax are pushing the climate change hoax. And Imperial College is doing the computer models of both. And it's no accident that Agenda 2030, the UN plan to transform society to a centralized tyranny, is Agenda 2030. 2030 is the year when human brains are planned to be connected to AI, according to people like Kurzweil. And 12 years to save the planet takes us to 2030, 2031. 2030 is a big year where everything comes together in their plan to create this. And both the COVID era and human-caused climate change are both being justified to create this structure that I started out with at the start of this section. And they're both no-problem reaction solutions to transform human society and create creative destruction, destroying the status quo so we can build back better to the Great Reset. And the Great Reset that is pushed by Al Gore and climate change is being used to justify. And down here in the cult, you've got the Club of Rome that was created in 1968 specifically to use the environment as an excuse for centralization of global power. Club of Rome, planetary emergency plan declared. They're all pushing this Great Reset, and the woke foot soldiers are playing their essential role in pushing an agenda that they will also be subjected to eventually. It's pathetic. I live in the real world. Actually, you don't. Climate change is another subconscious mind control infusion. And when you look at the evidence rather than take your conclusion at the start of the process, you find that closing up into the high 90% of greenhouse gases are water vapor and clouds. And the demonization of CO2 is for something that is a fraction of the greenhouse gas makeup. It's the gas of life. That's what CO2 is. Without the gas of life, there would be no natural world. There'd be no greenery. There'd be no food. There'd be no humans. So let's demonize it. Greenpeace founder Patrick Moore said it's not that there's too much CO2, there's not enough. Plants draw CO2 out of the atmosphere. And he said plants start to die at 150 parts per million in the atmosphere. And even when CO2 fell to 180 parts per million, plants began to starve. It was only turned around when the temperature went up and more CO2 was released. Today, CO2, he said, stands at just over 400 parts per million, and plant life is still relatively starved in nutrition. This is why they put more CO2 into greenhouses, to make things grow quicker and better and bigger. With the optimum levels for plant growth 5 times higher at 2,000 parts per million. And in some periods of the Earth's history, the ratio has reached 4,000 parts per million. And yet, here we have the gas of life. Not only are they pushing not to produce anymore, but people like Gates are funding technology to suck it out of the atmosphere. And CO2 is making the world greener. As it's increased, the world has become greener. That's what happens in greenhouses. And while they're pushing this agenda for global transformation of human society on a hoax, 1.56 billion face masks entering the marine environment alone in 2020, and what will it be by now? Would he care about the environment? No. Only about global warming, because that's the agenda. And these people that are pushing this, and this COP26 has been going on this week, they are being had. And they're being had to push an agenda that is designed for mass human control and is part of this psychological operation to break our spirit. Food shortages, fuel shortages, soaring prices, power cuts, internet down, all these are planned to break our spirit, which must not be broken. Because this is the mentality, this is the state of consciousness that's behind all this. And are we going to give the world to this? And give the world of our children to this? Is that what we're here to do? And I'll just finish with this in this section. Why is the agenda so anti-human? Because the spider driving this cult is not human. That's why the agenda is as it is. This spider is this reptilian and other non-human species which is driving the transformation of life on Earth and the nature of the processes of the Earth to suit itself and not humanity, which is why the agenda is so anti-human. I've been saying this for a long time and got enormous ridicule for it. But more and more people, because of what they've seen in the last 18 months, are starting to say, well, if that was possible, well, I'm not going to rule this out anymore. Nor should they. These are all expressions of this Wetiko frequency operating in the same way psychologically. Whether it's a psychopath in human form or non-human form, they are the same expressions of this frequency I call Wetiko. And these reptilians operate just outside the human frequency band, and they manipulate inside that human frequency, what we call the human world, via this cult. And it's part human, part non-human hybrid networks of bloodlines. So this is why this agenda is so anti-human, because it's being driven by non-human forces, demonizing the gas of life, without which we'd all be dead. Changing the nature of the human via DNA manipulation and genetic manipulation in general. Changing the atmosphere, which is what people like Gates are trying to do. Mass depopulation of the human family. Destruction of the human immune system. Systematic sterilization of humans as we are now. Generating 5G, which at 60 gigahertz interacts with the oxygen molecule to stop people absorbing enough oxygen with each breath that they normally would. See masks. On and on it goes. It's a non-human agenda because it's being driven by a non-human force. And how about this transformation of the atmosphere and transformation of the frequency nature of life on Earth via this technologically generated frequency bombardment, not least 5G, and they talked about 6G and 7G. How about this is not only about a human control system, how about that it's changing the atmosphere and the frequency nature of this world so that these entities can manifest in it? And how kind of coincidental that as I've researched this reptilian race over the years and talked to people who've interacted with them, that they say this reptilian race is obsessed with technology and that technology is its method of control. Coincidence? I go into all this reptilian stuff in The Biggest Secret, which I wrote in 1997, and Children of the Matrix came out in 2001. And I just say this, the forensic research that went into accurately predicting current events was the same forensic research that went into this. And I wouldn't have come out with this, I knew what the reaction would be, unless the evidence convince me that this is real. And so now this week, or last week, we've had this partner of a princess in Norway coming out and saying that he's a hybrid of a human and a space lizard. And here's a story from this week. Reptilian beings emerged during government-funded psychedelic studies, where more than half of the people that went into a psychedelic state saw exactly or virtually exactly the same reptilian entities in the same location, situation, doing the same things. And what's the chances of a coincidence of the UN, completely cult-controlled, putting out this video this week promoting climate change responses, in other words, changing society for climate change. And they used this figure to give a speech on extinction to the symbolic delegates at the UN. So, how symbolic to have the delegates representing the world standing up and giving a standing ovation to this reptile figure. I tell you, these people don't do these things by accident. They do them by design. They do them through symbolism, and they do them to put on public display what's actually going on, almost laughing at us because, oh, they'll never work it out. Well, maybe some of us have. And just finally, what is going on then? I can't give a better example of what's going on than the Avatar movie. If you remember, if you've seen it, there's these blue people, the Na'vi, on this planet or this moon. And the American military come because they want the resources of this moon, this planet moon. But they know that if they come as humans, symbolic of this reptilian infiltration, then obviously the blue people will see them and say, you're not like us, are you? So what are you doing here? So what they do is they take on an outer shell of the Na'vi, the blue people, and they infiltrate Na'vi society where the Na'vi think that they are one of them. And that is precisely what is happening in our world and has been happening for a long time. Just as the Na'vi were infiltrated by humans hiding behind a Na'vi outer shell, so the reptilian infiltrators are hiding behind human form in these hybrid information field body constructs that I talked about earlier. So when you look at the major players in this cult and the major operatives in this cult, they may look human, but behind that facade, they are not. And there was a great movie, it was a B movie, it came out in the 1980s called They Live, which, if you can find it on the internet, magnificently portrays what's going on, where human society is infiltrated by people who are not human, but hiding behind human form. And the star of the film, Roddy Piper, he's passed on now, did an interview some years ago in which he was talking about They Live, and he mentioned my work and how basically it was describing what's going on. And he said, They Live was not a movie, it was a documentary. And it was. And I do recommend it. So why don't they take over? Because they can't. If they could, they would have done long ago. They have a vibrational and they have an atmospheric problem with that. And also, they have to do it by manipulating human perception for humanity to give away its mind to them. And that's what I've been describing in this second section today. The manipulation of humanity to give its mind away to be externally controlled and become an asset of this non-human force. And this is the hive mind that I've talked about for so long. Connecting humans to AI, but what is AI? Yes, it's algorithmic AI on one level and AI of another kind on another level. Well, what is it ultimately? What if this AI that they want to connect to the human brain was actually a non-human species ultimately, that was creating a hive mind in which all of humans were connected to the same input, the same influence, the same perceptual dictatorship? That's exactly what's going on. And the metaverse, this guy Zuckerberg, is all part of this assimilation. And this is an old slide from a long ago talk in which I was then not talking about Wetiko, I was talking about archons, which is the Gnostic version of Wetiko. And I was talking then about the plan to create the hive mind in which this non-human force would connect to all human brains and control them from a central point. The assimilation, I called it, and that is what's going on before our eyes. The world is mad, and once you realize that, it all makes sense. Trying to make sense of it as if the world is sane, you'll never do it. Why is the world mad? Because it's meant to be, because of the outcome, the effect that has in advancing this agenda. We are witnessing and participating in the normalization of insanity. That's what's going on before our eyes. That's what the COVID era has been all about. And as Jiddu Krishnamurti said, it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And this is what we need to remember all the time. 2 and 2 equals 4. And we never let it equal anything else, or Wetiko will be starting to influence our perception. And we need to stop taking orders from psychopaths. And we need to work to put these psychopaths before Nuremberg trials so that they can be put away, safely away from humanity for the rest of their lives. So that's the end of section 2. It's a bit long. I've only done it for the first time today, so I didn't know how long it was going to be. The break, we'll cut the break this time to half an hour, and I'll come back with the final section, which really does address that question. Where from here? See you in half an hour. Thank you very much. Bye.